Hey guys. Tonight, we step into the echoing halls of a medieval castle that was never just stone and mortar. It was a grave that refused to stay quiet. You've probably seen haunted castles in movies. A pale figure in the window, a ghost in a white gown, a polite chill in the air that makes tourists shiver and laugh. The real thing was nothing like that. Medieval hauntings weren't whispers or shadows. They were screams that cracked through the walls, revenants clawing out of shallow graves, priests sealing doors because the dead kept walking through them. These castles didn't creak. They breathed. They pressed in on you until you prayed for the silence to end, even if it meant facing what was waiting in the dark. This is why you wouldn't survive a medieval haunted castle, and by the end of tonight, you'll understand why no one who truly lived in one ever called it a home. And hey, if you'd like to help keep the lanterns lit in this drafty old castle and fund the reckless amount of caffeine it takes to wander down corridors full of screaming revenants at 3 a.m., there's a Buy Me a Coffee link pinned in the comments. No pressure at all, but every cup keeps the ghost distracted for one more night, and maybe keeps me from being bricked up in the walls like the last poor soul who ran out of espresso. But before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. Congratulations. You're now the proud owner of a medieval castle. Don't smile. It's not that kind of inheritance. There was no reading of a will in a candlelit room with velvet drapes and gasps from distant cousins. Just a letter from a solicitor who probably drinks too much and smiles too little. A thin envelope, one key, and a location you had to squint at on Google Maps because it didn't come up at first. You didn't even know your great-uncle whatever existed. No one did. And yet, here you are, standing in the shadow of something older than your family tree and twice as twisted. The castle doesn't welcome you. It looms, tall, jagged, and unapologetically hostile. The stone is blackened with time, like it's been smoking in secret for the last 600 years. Ivy chokes the outer walls like it's trying to hold something in, not out. The front doors are 12 feet high, warped oak, banded with rusted iron, and they creak open, not because you push hard, but because they were already ajar, like the place expected you. The air that greets you is not stale. It's wet, breathing, as if the building exhales when it realizes you're alone. The villagers were polite, in that stilted, haunted way people are when they want to say something but know it won't matter. They wouldn't make eye contact. The man at the petrol station wouldn't hand you the receipt. He just slid it across the counter and mumbled something that sounded like, "God help you." The woman at the bakery wrapped your bread too tightly, like she wanted it to suffocate before you reached the hill. You laughed at it in the car, called it charming. That was 3 hours ago. You're not laughing now. The castle has no power. Of course not. The electrician you called before arriving canceled last minute. Something about family emergency. When you offered to reschedule, he said it wasn't that kind of emergency. You didn't press. You should have. Your flashlight cuts weak circles in the air as you step inside, and the light bounces off stone in a way that makes you feel like you're underwater. The silence here isn't empty. It's dense, a packed quiet, like the walls are holding their breath until you say something stupid. And you do. You call out hello? Like you're the first idiot in a horror movie who thinks the building will politely answer back. It doesn't, but something shifts upstairs. You tell yourself it was wood settling. You repeat it 3 times like a prayer. The 4th time you say it, your breath fogs in front of your mouth, even though it's July. Welcome home. The main hall is enormous, designed to impress people who've long since rotted into the ground. Suits of armor line the walls, but the kind that doesn't shine anymore. The metal is dull, almost wet-looking, and one of them is missing a hand. Not broken, removed, deliberately. A thick wool tapestry hangs above the fireplace, depicting a hunting scene so violent it feels like a threat. You stare at it too long and start to think the deer is looking at you. You turn away, only to find one of the suits of armor has shifted slightly, just an inch, just enough. You find the room they called a study. It's full of books that crackle when opened, pages too brittle to flip without guilt. The fireplace is unused, the grate cold and filled with soot that smells vaguely of bone. You find a journal left on the desk. The last entry is dated 1906. It reads, "I sealed the east wing again. The whispering is louder now. I think it knows I'm listening." You close the journal, very slowly, and put it back exactly where you found it. There is no east wing on the map they gave you. You explore, because of course you do. The stairs are uneven, each one a slightly different height, like they're trying to catch your foot. The banister is slick with something you tell yourself is just condensation. Upstairs, the bedrooms are worse. The beds are made, but the linens are damp and sunless. Every mattress has a deep hollow in the center, like someone laid down and never got up. Mirrors are turned to face the wall, not broken, just punished. You turn one around, daring yourself to be brave, and your reflection stares back with a little too much interest. Outside, the grounds are silent. No birds, no bugs, no rustling of trees, just stillness. The garden is overgrown in precise ways. Paths choked with thorned vines, roses that bloom only where they shouldn't. A statue stands in the center, but it's been worn down by time. Its face is featureless, hands folded in front of something that might be a book or a warning. You try not to look at it as you pass. It's hard. It has a presence. Night falls fast here, as if the sun is running away. You light candles, not for atmosphere, but because the dark presses in hard enough to make your eyes ache. The flames flicker wildly, even without wind. One snuffs out on its own. You relight it. It snuffs out again. You leave it alone after that. Somewhere in the castle, something moves again, not loud, not obvious. Just enough to remind you that you're not alone. Not really. You try the phone. No signal. Your battery drops 10% in a minute. You check the map again and realize you can't remember the last time you saw another house. The road in was longer than it should have been. Or maybe it's the castle stretching behind your back. Maybe the walls moved when you weren't looking. The fireplace groans. Not the wind, not the structure. It groans like something deep beneath it is rolling over in its sleep. The temperature drops again. You start to shiver, but not from cold. The candles all flicker together, as if nodding to something in agreement. You're here. You're inside. And now, it's paying attention. There is no warmth here. Not in the stone, not in the air, not in the bones of the place, or the ones that used to live in it. Castles, you've been told, are romantic. Fairy tale silhouettes against a pink sky. Ivy-covered towers where princesses sigh and lords brood dramatically by the fire. What no one tells you is that those towers are wind tunnels. The ivy is full of spiders, and the fire doesn't so much roar as wheeze into smoke that stings your eyes and soaks your clothes with the smell of rot. These were not homes. These were fortresses, tombs made of granite, and you've just walked into one willingly. Your boots echo in the hallway, even though you try to step lightly. It doesn't help. The floor is made of thick, uneven flagstones that click against your soles like bones clacking together. Every sound feels exaggerated, drawn out, mocked. The walls sweat constantly. You run your fingers along one and come away with moss and something black beneath your nails. The scent hits you then, not musty, not dusty. It's older, riper. A sour, stomach-turning blend of old blood, wet stone, and decay so deeply rooted into the mortar, it feels like the building itself is decomposing from the inside out. You try not to gag. The castle notices. There is no insulation. None. The walls are 3 feet thick in places, and somehow manage to hold in precisely 0 warmth. The cold here isn't just temperature. It's intention. It seeps into your joints and nests there, setting up camp like it's been waiting for you. You're not chilled. You're possessed by cold. Your breath hangs in front of you like a warning, but there's no fire to flee to. The hearth is ancient, its stones stained from centuries of desperate attempts at heat. You find a log in a nearby basket, thick with lichen and soft with age. It doesn't burn. It hisses, smokes, then dies with a whisper. The windows are slits, literal arrow slits, designed for defending, not for light. What little daylight creeps in looks bruised. Every beam is gray, weak, and unwilling. Even the sun doesn't want to be here. You look up and see the rafters high above, slick with moisture and webbed with decay. Something skitters into shadow, claws clicking wood. You tell yourself it's a bat. You hope you're right. The walls are made of roughly hewn stone, the kind that seems to absorb sound and stare back at you. In some places, the stones don't line up cleanly, leaving gaps wide enough to fit a finger through. Cold air pulses from them, or maybe it's breath. You don't check. Tapestries hang limp on the walls, their colors long since bled into a uniform rotten brown. You can't tell what the original images were. Knights, maybe, or saints, or something with more teeth than either should have. You touch one, and it crumbles. You apologize aloud. The ceiling groans, not from footsteps, just from existing. Old wood, old weight, and something heavier above it all. You haven't been to the upper floors yet. Something about them feels older than the rest, wronger, like they were built first and forgotten fastest. The staircase curves sharply upward, vanishing into a narrow passage that seems to grow smaller the longer you stare. You make a note to wait until daylight to explore. Not that it matters. Light doesn't help here. It just makes the shadows jealous. You open a door and find what might once have been a bedroom. The bed frame is iron, twisted and rusted. The mattress a vague suggestion of former straw. A blanket lies across it, stiff and green with mildew, as if someone pulled it over themselves 300 years ago and never got back up. The walls in this room are darker than the hallway, stained with something you don't want to identify. The floor creaks under your weight, but only in response to your steps, as if it's waiting to mimic you. You glance behind. There's nothing there. Not yet. The smell is stronger here, less abstract. It smells like something died under the floorboards and wasn't discovered until it became part of the architecture. You cover your mouth with your sleeve, which smells like smoke and fear. The candle in your hand flutters violently for no reason. No draft, no wind, just a sudden, impossible inhale. You freeze. The flame recovers. You pretend that means you're safe. Every room is worse. The kitchen still has rusted hooks hanging from the ceiling, meat chains that haven't held anything but spiders in centuries. The scullery has a drain in the floor that leads to nowhere, and the basin above it is cracked down the center like a snapped jaw. You don't look too long at the stains on the stone counter. They're dark and irregular, and remind you of teeth marks. There's no explanation that feels good. At some point, the whispering starts. You don't know when, exactly. You just realize suddenly that the silence has layers. There's the quiet of the wind outside, the quiet of the stone holding its breath, and underneath that, something softer, like someone trying not to be heard. The sound comes from the walls, from the floor, from your own heartbeat when you stop moving. It's never loud, but it's always there. You try to tell yourself it's the wind. You say it out loud. The whispering pauses, then continues. You find yourself talking to the walls, not to soothe yourself, to convince them that you're polite, that you're temporary, that you don't want trouble, that you won't ask questions, that you'll sleep in the cold and say thank you and not dig where you're not supposed to. You know how ridiculous it is. You do it anyway. The castle listens, not with ears, with stone. At night, the smell thickens. The cold deepens. The castle presses down like a lid. Your breath fogs inside your room. The fire refuses to light again. You try to bury yourself in the stiff blanket, but it feels damp from the inside out. You close your eyes, but the darkness behind your lids is thinner than the one in the room. You hear movement above you, below you, inside you. Castles weren't built for peace. They were built for siege, for isolation, for punishment. And this one remembers how. You chose the largest bedroom because of course you did. You figured you'd earned that much, dragging your body through dust and cold, and corridors that breathed behind your back. You told yourself it was smart. More space, better airflow, fewer rats maybe. But when you opened the door, you knew something was wrong. The size wasn't comforting. It was suspicious. Like the room had been made large to accommodate something other than people. The ceilings soared unnecessarily high, and the corners didn't feel like corners at all. They felt like the start of something deeper, unfinished, left out of the blueprints. Then you noticed the doors, 6 of them, all leading in different directions, none of them matching. One is oak and iron, like the main entryway. One is warped pine, bleached pale as bone. One looks like a closet, but opens inward to stone steps that vanish downward. One is locked from the inside. One doesn't have a handle, only a circular indent where a knob might have once been. The last is just open. Not wide, not inviting. Just ajar, enough to suggest motion. None of them are labeled. You didn't open all of them. You meant to, but something stopped you. Maybe it was the smell leaking from the steps, or the cold that curled through the cracked pine frame. You told yourself you'd inspect them later. You never did. You moved your things in anyway, if you can even call them things. A half-charged phone, 2 changes of clothes, a flashlight you don't trust, and the candle the caretaker left on the sill with a single wooden match. He didn't explain anything, just said, "It's best not to move too much at night," and then walked away fast enough to raise questions. You didn't ask them. You were too busy pretending to be brave. The bed is enormous. That old royal kind of enormous, made for people who slept in layers and never truly rested. The frame is dark, carved with symbols you don't recognize and don't want to learn. The mattress sags in the middle, and the sheets are stiff with age but recently changed, which is its own kind of horror. Someone made this bed. For you. The candle flickers on the mantel, casting long shadows that don't match your movements. The light doesn't reach the doors. You pick the door that seems most ordinary and wedge a chair under the handle. It feels good to do something practical. You eye the others but ultimately decide not to touch them. If something wants in, a chair won't stop it. You blow out the candle, climb into the bed, and pull the covers up to your throat. It's cold, but not just cold. It's invasive, the kind of chill that feels intelligent. You try to sleep anyway. You don't. At some point in the night, the door with no handle clicks. Not loudly, just a soft metallic shift, like something testing the mechanism from the other side. You freeze in bed, mouth dry, every muscle coiled like wire. The sound doesn't come again. Not immediately. You stare into the dark until your eyes blur. Then the open door shifts. Just a creak. Just a whisper of wood on stone. Your flashlight is 3 feet away. On the dresser. You don't reach for it. You close your eyes and pretend that helps. When you open them again, the room has changed. The candle is lit. You didn't do it. The chair is no longer under the door handle. It's placed neatly beside the bed, facing you. The door it once held is open. You sit up slowly, not because you want to, but because something about the room demands acknowledgement. All 6 doors are now ajar, none wide enough to see through, just enough to be aware of absence. You try to speak, to ask the stupid questions. Who's there? What do you want? What the hell is this? But your voice doesn't come. Your throat has closed around the cold. You rise, because not doing so feels worse, and move toward the nearest door. The air changes as you approach it, thickening like you've stepped into water. You reach for the edge and pull it open fully. It reveals a blank stone wall, nothing more. You turn to the next door. Same. A third. Wall again. You move faster now, a desperate rhythm, a need to break the pattern. 5th door. Wall. 6th door. The one that once had stairs. Gone. It opens to your reflection. You step back, hard, slam into the bed frame. The reflection doesn't mirror your movement. It stands still, facing you, breathing softly. Its eyes are yours but wrong. Its mouth is closed but humming. You blink and it's gone, not vanished. Just the door is a wall again, flat and gray. Your breath is ragged now, your hands shaking. The candle flares. You look up. The chair is back under the door, the one that clicked. You don't remember putting it there, but something wants you to notice. You think about leaving the room, about choosing any direction, any hallway, even the woods. But your feet won't move. The walls feel closer. You sit back on the bed, because it's the only thing that doesn't pretend. It sags beneath you, grateful maybe. You wait. Time slides. Eventually, you sleep. You wake to find all the doors shut again. Locked. Your phone is dead. Your candle is a stub. And something has written the word "stay" in the dust on your windowsill. You wipe it away. But the glass fogs with breath from the other side. In the modern world, ghosts are polite, transparent, theatrical. They glide across hotel hallways in old nightgowns and whisper sad names into the ears of psychic investigators. Sometimes they knock over a vase or show up on infrared with a little heat signature like a disappointed dad. You can rationalize them, blame the plumbing, the draft, your own brain doing something weird because you haven't slept right in a week. But that version of the ghost, the flickering Victorian lady or mournful soldier pacing through a museum, that's new. That's the domesticated version. The cleaned-up haunting made for television and TikTok and tours with laminated name tags. Medieval ghosts weren't like that. They didn't whisper. They wailed. They didn't drift in and out of your vision like shy memories. They rotted, screamed, bled through walls, and pulled their own hair out in front of your bed. They didn't visit to gently unsettle. They broke into the world like something tearing through skin. These weren't souls with unfinished business. They were agony made visible. You weren't supposed to see them. You were supposed to suffer with them. Back then, death wasn't distant. It sat at the dinner table. It spoiled the meat. It lived in your water and hid behind every childbirth and scab and breath. When someone died, they didn't go away. They just started leaking into the world a different way. And the ones who lingered didn't do it because they had a message or a mystery to solve. They lingered because they were hungry, because they were angry, because the priest didn't say the right words over their grave, or because the body was buried too shallow, or because the sins they carried were heavier than the dirt that covered them. You didn't call these spirits ghosts. You called them revenants, returned ones, the ones who came back wrong. There are records, letters, testimonies, scrawled in Latin and desperation. One tells of a man buried on unhallowed ground, who rose every night with blood dripping from his mouth, not his own. He visited homes and stood outside the door until the dogs went mad and the children went still. Another account speaks of a woman who died during a famine and returned with her stomach torn open, begging for bread, while black smoke poured from her mouth. When no one fed her, she screamed until the crops failed again. These ghosts didn't haunt. They infected. You feel that here. In the castle. In the walls. This place is older than most churches. Older than maps. Older than the idea that souls deserved peace. You walk down the corridor, and the air shifts. Not colder. Wetter. Denser. It slides into your throat and tastes like rust. You try not to breathe too deeply. One of the hallways curves, even though it shouldn't. You follow it. You always follow it. At the end is a wooden door, low and arched, with a blackened iron latch. You open it slowly. Inside is a chapel, or what's left of one. The ceiling is collapsed in one corner, exposing thick beams clawed by centuries of weather and worse. The altar is nothing but a slab now, but beneath it is a pile of broken bones, neatly arranged and far too clean. The crucifix on the far wall is upside down, not a symbol, just wrong. Like gravity worked differently here once. The walls are covered in soot and old symbols drawn in ash. You don't recognize the language, but your stomach does. It twists hard. You step inside and feel it immediately. Not presence, pressure. Like being watched through layers of fog, or like your name is being whispered by someone who's already inside your lungs. The stained glass is gone, replaced with boards. One is loose. You pry it back just enough to see through. What you glimpse is not the outside, not daylight, just a wall of soil, packed tight, like this room was buried on purpose. You back out slowly, close the door, and feel a breath of hot air on your neck. You turn. Nothing. But the hallway smells different now, like singed hair and rain on stone. You walk faster, then slower, because running here feels like begging. You pass another door and hear something behind it. Not movement, scraping, like someone dragging themselves across slate with no legs. You don't stop. You reach your room and slam the door behind you. All 6 doors inside are shut. Again, for now. You light your last candle. It won't stay lit. The flame stutters every time you exhale. You curl into the bed and try to remember a time when sleep wasn't something you had to survive. But even with your eyes closed, you hear it. Not outside. Inside. The walls. They're murmuring. Not in a voice, in a feeling. A rising pressure behind your teeth, like the language is trying to come out of your own mouth. You bite your lip hard enough to taste blood. When you finally sleep, you dream of a woman wrapped in wool and mud, her mouth stitched shut with thorns, her eyes replaced with black coins. She stands at the edge of your bed and tries to scream, but all that comes out is fire. Not the good kind, not the kind that warms, the kind that peels, the kind that smells like punishment. You wake with your lips burned, just the bottom one, just enough. In the corner of the room, the candle has melted into a pool of wax shaped like a screaming face. You blink, and it's just wax. The door with no knob is open again. You close it with shaking hands and feel something give behind it. Not resistance, surrender. As if whatever waited there is finally tired of trying. You go back to bed. You do not sleep. Outside, something shrieks in the woods. It sounds like it used to be human. The castle isn't quiet anymore. It was, for the first day or two, silent in that heavy, dead way. Like a crypt, too proud to admit it still remembered the living. But now it moves. Not constantly, not enough to track, but just often enough that you can no longer pretend it's your imagination. It creaks in places with no wood, groans in corners where there's nothing to support, and sometimes the stones themselves seem to click together like teeth settling after a long sleep. You hear it when you lie down at night. The soft shift of pressure behind the walls, the slow breath of air that has nothing to do with weather. It exhales down your spine when you're not looking. You've stopped calling it a draft. You know better now. The first time you saw the stones shift, you didn't believe it. You thought maybe your eyes were tired, the candlelight playing tricks on old mortar. But when you passed the same hallway minutes later, the tapestry had moved. Not fallen, not torn. Just shifted a few inches to the right, perfectly aligned with a hairline crack in the wall that hadn't been there before. You touched it. The stone was warm. Not sun-warmed, not fire-warmed. Body-warm. It pulsed once beneath your fingertips and then went still, like it regretted the contact. You told yourself it was nothing. You say that a lot lately. Doors close when you leave them open. Windows you never touched suddenly yawn wide to the cold, and sometimes your reflection in the glass doesn't leave when you do. The mirror in your bedroom has a hairline fracture running diagonally through the center, and each night it gets a little longer. You haven't looked directly into it since the morning it smiled before you did. The smile didn't have teeth, just black behind the lips, like the mouth opened onto something deeper than shadow. At first, the castle only reacted to you. It made you feel observed, tested, but now it anticipates. You walk down a hallway and the floor sags beneath your foot, as if it's bracing for your weight before you arrive. You reach for a doorknob and the handle is already turning, not quickly, just a gentle twitch, as if it's considering whether to open or bite. The floorboards, where they still exist, murmur. You feel vibrations you can't explain, rhythmic, patient, like something pacing underneath. You tried leaving once, packed what little you brought, marched to the front door with your jaw clenched so tight your molars ached. The main hall didn't fight you, not exactly, but as you moved through it, the floor seemed longer, the archways taller. Each step echoed just a beat too late, like someone else following half a second behind. The closer you got to the threshold, the heavier the air became, until you were moving through something thicker than fog. You reached the door, touched the latch, and the metal scalded your hand. Not enough to blister, just enough to warn. The wind outside howled like it had lungs. You backed away, slowly, apologetically. Now you know better. This isn't a building, it's a body, not a metaphor, not a mood, a body, and you're inside it. Maybe you always have been. The stones don't settle, they flex. Not visibly, not with dramatic cracks and rumbling footsteps, but when you lean against the wall, it presses back, like muscle beneath skin. You can feel tension now, like the castle is waiting for something, waiting for you to do something specific, something final, and until you do, it just adjusts, keeps you, studies how far it can push before you scream. You haven't screamed yet. That feels important. You stopped lighting candles. They don't stay lit. You've tried oil lamps, flashlights, even a pathetic nightlight plugged into the single working outlet in the study. None of them last. The batteries drain in minutes. The flames choke and sputter. The bulbs flicker until they don't. The dark isn't total, though. There's always a faint glow. Not from the moon, not from any source you can find. Just a reddish haze that creeps through the cracks, low and pulsing, like blood filtered through old stone, like the walls themselves are lit from inside. Last night, you heard footsteps in the ceiling. Not rats, not creaks, actual steps, slow and deliberate, followed by a dragging sound that went on too long and ended too abruptly. You lay still and counted your breaths. At some point, you realized the breathing wasn't yours. It was deeper, heavier, inhaling when you exhaled, laughing, almost. A low rattle, like the sound of wind through ribs. There's a room you haven't opened. Near the back of the west wing, just past the cold corridor where the floor turns slick with moss. The door is smaller than the rest, made of stone instead of wood, with a narrow slit where a key might go. You don't have that key. You've tried everything else. Knives, crowbars, even one of the ancient iron spikes pried from a suit of armor. Nothing works. But sometimes, when you pass it, you hear humming, low and tuneless, like a voice without words. It's never there when you press your ear to the door, only when your back is turned. The humming follows you now, not every night, just the ones where you dream of staircases that go in circles and of rooms with ceilings made of teeth. You wake drenched in sweat and find the door cracked open just an inch, never enough to see inside, always enough to know it wants to be opened. You asked the castle a question once. You stood in the main hall, hands trembling, voice hoarse, and whispered, "What do you want?" The wall in front of you cracked, just slightly. A line across the stone, fresh and wet, like a smile. You haven't asked again. Now the floors tilt when you walk. The paintings on the walls have started to rot. One lost its face overnight, the paint curling away from the canvas like burnt skin. Another, which once showed a knight standing triumphant, now bleeds from the eyes. You didn't notice at first, not until you stepped in the stain and left a red trail down the corridor. You tried to clean it. The stain came back. The castle does not want you dead. That would be too kind. It wants you hollowed, changed, broken down into something that fits better inside it. You feel it working on you. In the way you've stopped checking the windows, in how the silence no longer feels unnatural, in the way you mutter apologies when you touch the walls. You sleep less now, or maybe more. The dreams feel real enough that you wake up sore, bruised, covered in dust that smells like someone else's memories. You stopped counting the days. The castle hasn't. You find the well on accident. The courtyard isn't where it should be. You were following a corridor that circled the east wing, hoping for a glimpse of sun, maybe even the barest suggestion of birdsong, something that proved the world still existed beyond these walls. Instead, you pushed open a swollen wooden door and stepped into open air that didn't feel like air. The wind didn't move. The sky, if you could call it that, looked bruised, like the inside of a lid closed too tightly. The trees in the distance leaned away from the castle, their branches frozen mid-flee. And in the center of the courtyard, like a wound in the stone, was the well. It shouldn't be there. The ground around it is cracked in a perfect circle, as though the earth itself rejected its presence. There's no rope, no bucket, no pulley, just a stone lip darkened by centuries of hands and something deeper. The well is narrow but impossibly deep. You drop a pebble in, and it never hits bottom. Not with a splash, not with a sound. It simply vanishes. You lean over and wish you hadn't. There are scratch marks on the inside, faint but undeniable, not random scuffs, patterns, desperate attempts, fingers, dozens of them, clawing upwards. The stone is worn smooth in places where palms must have slammed again and again, hoping someone, anyone, was listening. The moss growing around the rim is black, slick with moisture that smells wrong, too metallic, too warm. You hear the story later. From a book you didn't open. The pages opened themselves, a brittle leather-bound volume that sat untouched on the writing desk in the room you swore had been locked yesterday. It was turned to a chapter titled Only Her. The ink was brown with time or blood. You didn't look too closely. They say she was married at 16, which wasn't young then, just convenient. A deal between families, forged in coin and cattle. The groom was twice her age, a man with a limp and a temper and no air. The wedding was rushed, the feast short. She was never seen again. The story says she ran, that she couldn't handle the pressure of a noble house, that her mind broke and her feet followed. But the castle remembers differently. The castle has no interest in stories told by men with reasons to lie, because sometimes, late at night, you hear her. Not a sob, not a moan. A song, humming, low and dissonant, coming from beneath the flagstones. You follow it once, only once. And when you stand at the edge of the well, the melody grows clearer. It's not sad. It's not even beautiful. It's hollow, like someone trying to remember how a lullaby is supposed to sound, but can only recall the spaces between the notes. You peer down again, and this time, you see her. Not clearly, just a suggestion of white below the surface. Not water, not liquid, just a shifting light, like moon on silk. She moves, or the well does. The air thickens. Your breath catches, not from fear but from pressure, as if something is climbing up the air itself. You stumble back. The next morning, your fingernails are black. Just the tips, just your right hand. The dreams begin shortly after. You're walking through the castle in silence, barefoot, dressed in something wet and heavy. Your skin is cold. Your feet slap against stone that doesn't echo. In the dream, you know where you're going. The hallways open for you. No doors resist. The castle welcomes you now. It always did. You reach the courtyard, and the well is open. Not just open, glowing. The light is the color of old pearls and bad teeth. You step forward. You never see yourself fall. You only wake with water in your mouth. It tastes like grief. One night, the humming stops. You lie awake for hours, waiting, begging for it even. Silence is worse. Then, the wind returns. Not real wind, but something pretending. A voice exhaling. It whispers your name, but not in your ear. Inside your skull, from the base of your spine upward, you sit up and see the wet footprints. They lead from the doorway to your bed and back again. Small, bare, perfect. They never drip. They never dry. You follow them once, down the hall, through 3 locked doors that now open with a sigh. They end at the well. You lean over. This time, you don't see her. You see yourself. Standing at the bottom, dress torn, lips blue, hair drifting upward like seaweed. You blink, and the image is gone. But the humming starts again. The next day, the window in your room is cracked from the inside. Carved along the glass, with something sharp and desperate, are the words, "I was promised love." That night, she visits. She doesn't walk. She doesn't float. She simply arrives. One moment, you're alone in bed, clutching the candle stub, trying not to think about water. The next, she's at the foot of your mattress. Her dress still shimmers, though it's torn along the seams. Her veil is gone. Her mouth is full of soil. She does not blink. She smells like lilies drowned in wine. You can't move. You can't speak. You can only watch as she opens her hand, and in her palm is a silver ring still slick with algae. You don't remember taking it. You wake with it on your finger. You try to throw it away. It always comes back. The staff won't speak of her. When you mention the humming, they change the subject. When you describe the smell of damp lace and broken vows, they say nothing at all. One of them, a boy no older than 20, just cried, quietly, wiping his hands on his apron, like the grief might spread. You keep the ring now. You wear it without thinking. Some days, you hum with her, not out loud, but the tune is always there. At first, it's just the coughing, a dry, papery rasp echoing down the eastern wing, too steady to be wind and too human to be ignored. You tell yourself it must be a draft, or maybe an animal caught in the walls again, gnawing at something soft. But the sound repeats, same cadence, same breath between wheezes. Always 3 coughs, followed by silence, then a whisper you can't quite catch, like a prayer unfinished, or a name abandoned halfway through. You close your door. You press your hands over your ears. You try to sleep. She comes anyway. No one remembers her name. The pages that mentioned her are gone, torn neatly from every ledger in the castle's library. One of the servants said her portrait used to hang in the chapel until it blackened overnight, canvas curling like burnt paper. They buried it in the woods. It came back, not whole, just the veil, draped over the chapel door like a warning or an invitation, depending on how long you've lived here. The coughing starts earlier now, right after dusk. Sometimes you hear her footsteps first, not the click of boots or the shuffle of slippers, just the soft drag of cloth on stone, like someone walking barefoot with too much to carry. You know better than to open the door. You know better than to answer the whisper. But you stand at the threshold anyway, breath locked behind your teeth, candle trembling in your grip as the coughing passes your door again. 3 coughs, a pause, then the whisper. Always the same rhythm, always just outside. You ask the groundskeeper once, an old man with moss under his nails and an eye that won't quite focus. You describe what you've heard. You keep your voice low, casual, like you're joking. He doesn't laugh. He spits, says nothing, just makes the sign of the cross backwards and leaves his tools where they lie. You never see him again. The veil appears next. It's left outside your door, folded neatly, pressed smooth, and wet, with something that smells like iron and incense. You don't touch it. You burn it. The flames flicker green. The ashes are gone by morning. That night, the prayer changes. The whisper is louder now. You still can't make out the words, but they sound closer, urgent, like she's praying through blood. You swear you hear your name in the middle of the chant, drawn out in a hiss like steam from a broken pipe. You ask one of the maids the next day if she's ever heard of a nun who lived in the castle. Her lips go white. She shakes her head but won't meet your eyes. Later, you find her on the floor outside the laundry room, collapsed over a pile of sheets, lips stained black. No cause, no marks, just gone. You stop asking questions. They say she came during the plague, not to die, but to serve. She walked from village to village, wrapped in thick linen robes and a veil soaked in vinegar. She prayed over the sick, anointed the dead, and never once removed her covering, not even to eat. When she came to this castle, there were already too many bodies to bury. They say she stayed anyway, prayed for every one. Then she vanished, not buried, not burned, just gone. Like the sickness took her and left the shape of her behind. Now she walks the halls. You see her on the 12th night, just for a moment, a shape in the mist that curls along the floor near the grand staircase. You're coming back from the cellar, hands full of logs for the fire, and you feel it before you see it, the air getting heavier, like you're inhaling through wool. Then there she is, tall, still, draped in wet white that trails behind her like rotting lace. You can't see her face. The veil is thick, dark at the edges where the cloth sticks to whatever's underneath. Her hands are tucked into her sleeves. You pray she keeps them there. She turns her head slowly, though you're not sure she has a head. You hear the whisper again, but it's not outside your door now. It's inside your ears, inside your teeth. You drop the logs. One rolls across the floor toward her and stops at her feet. She doesn't move. She doesn't have to. The wood blackens instantly, curling in on itself like it's rotting in fast forward. You run. She follows. Not quickly, not angrily, just patiently, like someone who knows you'll stop eventually. You reach your room and slam the door. Your breath clouds the mirror. The candle won't light. You feel heat on your cheek, not from fire but from fever. A sickly warmth rising in your skin, slow and steady, like something breathing inside you now. You sleep in fits, dreams of rooms full of coughing, of eyes leaking ash, of blood soaking through gauze that never dries. You wake to find your sheets soaked and your mouth full of the taste of vinegar. The castle is colder now, but you sweat through your clothes. You try to stay awake the next night. You drink tea laced with herbs from the garden. The leaves smell like metal. You read aloud to the walls just to hear a voice other than hers. When the coughing starts, you scream into the silence. It doesn't stop her. She waits outside your door for hours. You know because the air never warms. Eventually, you open the door. There's nothing there, just the veil, folded, wet, waiting. You take it this time. You don't wear it. Not yet. But you keep it near. Press it to your forehead when the coughing starts. Smell it when the dreams get too loud. And slowly, almost without noticing, you begin to understand the whisper, not the words, the rhythm. A prayer, yes, but not for the dead. For the dying, you say it with her once, under your breath, as you walk the hall. The words come naturally, like you've always known them. The next morning, your hands are folded differently, palms up, ready, waiting, like hers. The chapel is the only part of the castle that looks clean. Not new exactly, nothing here is, but preserved. The stone floor is free of moss. The air, though still thick, doesn't stink of mildew or blood or whatever foul thing sweats from the walls in the west wing. The glass windows are cracked, but the dust refuses to land on them. No cobwebs in the corners, no rats in the eaves. It's as though time itself avoided this place out of respect or fear, or both. You didn't want to come in, but the doors were open this morning, wide enough to show the altar, and something about the symmetry made you step forward. You couldn't help it. Your feet moved like they were remembering a rhythm your brain had never learned. The crucifix is crooked. You try to fix it. Your fingers don't reach. You stand there, staring, hands suspended in the air, heart slowing with every breath, until the chill creeps up your back like a wet hand pressing each vertebra. You let your arm fall. The cross stays tilted, watching. That night, you hear the footsteps, not adult ones. Too fast, too light, bare feet slapping against stone, echoing with the peculiar urgency of a child who's not supposed to be awake. You sit up in bed. You don't light the candle. You don't need to see. The footsteps stop just outside your door. You hold your breath, then a laugh. High, thin, broken in the middle, like a toy with a cracked voice box. You wait for the doorknob to turn. It doesn't. You wait longer. Your heart doesn't race. It freezes, like it's listening harder than your ears. After a few minutes, you get out of bed. Slowly, silently, the hall is empty. You find him the next day, though no one else seems to, in the chapel, far back near the pillar, where the shadow always pools no matter the light. He doesn't hide. He just stands there, pale and still, facing the altar. His hair is blonde and his robe is too short for his arms, like it belonged to someone who stopped growing. You try to speak, but your voice stays in your throat. He turns slowly and smiles. His mouth is wrong, the shape too wide, the lips too thin, and when he opens it, there are too many teeth. Not sharp, just repeated. Like someone copied a normal row of teeth and pasted it over and over again without adjusting for space. He doesn't blink. He just says, "Amen." You leave the chapel without walking. You're not sure how. One moment you're staring into the wet glint of his eyes, and the next, you're in your room, cold sweat soaking your collar. You lock the door. It unlocks itself 2 hours later. There's a book in the library that wasn't there before. You find it because it falls off the shelf without help. It lands open on the floor, spine split, pages yellow and delicate. You don't want to touch it, but you do. Your fingers are yours, but feel older. The ink is dense and Latin, but someone's written a single sentence in the margin in charcoal, in a child's careful hand. They said the devil left, but I was still screaming. The records are scarce. Some pages burned, others scraped clean. With such precision, it's clear someone wanted the memory gone. But the bones of the story remain. He was 8, maybe 9. He screamed at night, spoke in voices, tore at his skin with tiny nails until he bled into the cracks of the floor. They said he laughed in church and spat at the Eucharist. The priest said, "Possession." The doctor said, "Rot of the brain." The family said yes to both. The chapel was locked for 3 days. On the 4th, he was silent. On the 5th, the priest was found face down on the altar, with his eyes boiled in his skull. The child was never seen again, at least, not properly. Because now, at night, the footsteps return, always running, always stopping just before your room. The laugh gets shorter, less joyful, more confused, like he forgot what was funny. You wake to find your sheets twisted into knots you don't remember tying. Small, perfect knots, the kind a child would make to prove he could. One morning, the knots are around your wrists. You ask the castle staff if there are children nearby. They all say no. Some won't even answer. One looks down and mutters a prayer, then immediately bites his own tongue. You see the blood on his teeth as he limps away. The limp is new. You don't go back to the chapel, but he does. You hear the organ play on nights when the moon is full and red through the windows. You've never seen anyone touch the keys. The melody is wrong, like a hymn remembered through a fever. You press your ear to the chapel door once and hear a child's voice chanting beneath the notes. Not in Latin, not in any language you recognize, but your stomach turns all the same. One night, you light every candle in your room. You speak aloud, soft and steady. You say, "What do you want?" He answers, not in words, in presence. Your bed shifts, like someone climbed onto it. The air turns syrup thick, heavy with iron and incense. You close your eyes, but the smell follows you behind the lids. You feel pressure at your feet, then your legs, then something small crawling across your chest. You keep your eyes shut. A breath touches your ear, and a voice says, "They buried me in my prayers." You open your eyes. Nothing's there, but your pillow is soaked. You sleep on the floor now. The bed groans when you aren't in it, like it's disappointed. The chapel doors never shut anymore. He doesn't scream. You do. The first time you hear him is just after midnight. A sound like metal dragging against stone, slow and deliberate. Not the clumsy screech of something fallen, but the purposeful groan of a thing that has forgotten how to be gentle. You sit upright in bed, holding still, trying to convince yourself it was the wind, or rats, or the groaning of this castle's endless spine. But then it comes again, a rhythmic scrape pause, as if something heavy is pacing in the corridor. Armor, you think, before you can stop yourself. Not imagined, not metaphor, just armor, walking. You tell yourself not to open the door. You do it anyway. The hallway is empty, but the air is different, heavier, as though someone very large just stepped through and left the shape of their absence behind. There are no footsteps in the dust, but the dust is wrong. It's swirling, gently, as if something disturbed it from within, rather than above. You step forward and feel the cold rush past you, not around you, through you. Down the hall, one of the old display suits of armor has moved. You know it. You cataloged them your second day in the castle, desperate for distraction, noting which one still stood tall and which had crumpled like tired men frozen mid-battle. The suit near the library stairs had been leaning to one side, visor missing, gauntlets loose. Now it's upright, helmet straight, gauntlets clenched. You don't get closer. In the morning, it's back where it was, or close. But the hallway smells faintly of iron, old blood and older steel, the kind of smell that never quite leaves a place once it's soaked deep enough. You ask about Sir Henry at breakfast, voice light, pretending to joke. The cook drops her spoon. It clatters to the floor and no one picks it up. They don't answer. One of them makes a sign over her chest, not a cross, something older, crooked, and mutters something in a language you don't recognize. That afternoon, she's gone. You don't see her again. The story isn't in the books. Not in any official ones, at least. You find it in a torn page stuffed behind a beam in the attic, wrapped around a broken candle. The handwriting is frantic, almost clawed. It starts mid-sentence, and they left him screaming, but he wouldn't die. Not until morning. Not until the sun touched his bones. It takes you days to piece it together. Sir Henry had been a knight once, sworn to the lord of this castle centuries ago, a man of good standing, noble blood, and a thirst for something higher. When the king rode to war, Henry stayed behind, not to protect the keep, but to plan his betrayal. The records don't say why. Maybe power, maybe vengeance, maybe he just got tired of kneeling. He was caught, not quickly. He'd already raised a force, already penned his declaration, already picked out the room where he would sit when the crown fell. But he failed. And when they took him, they didn't hang him. They flayed him, alive, stripped him down in the great hall, inch by inch, muscle by muscle, nerve by screaming nerve. They say he didn't beg, that he laughed, that his blood soaked the stones so deep they never dried. They forced what was left of him back into his armor and stood it upright as a warning. Then they bricked him into the wall behind the chapel. He wasn't dead yet. The ghost came later. Now, the armor moves. Never when you're looking, but always when you turn away. You start noticing patterns. A gauntlet shifted, a breastplate buckled. The helmet turned just slightly, facing the door instead of the window. You see it in reflections, never directly, never in light, only in the shimmer of silverware, the murk of bath water, the dull gleam of your own doorknob. You begin to hear breathing, not labored, not soft, the kind of sound someone would make if they had no lungs but still remembered how to exhale. It's not near you, not always. Sometimes it's down the corridor. Sometimes it's behind a wall. Once, it's inside your wardrobe, pacing just behind the wood, joints creaking with rust and memory. You find flakes of metal under your pillow. You stop sleeping. The armor stands in the main hall now. No one put it there. No one will move it. You try once. You touch the pauldron and the cold shoots through your palm like lightning, numbing your fingers for hours. The next day, your fingernails are gray. They don't hurt, but they feel brittle, like they belong to someone else. You see him. Truly see him. Only once. The moon is full. You can't stay in your room. Something is wrong with the mirror. It won't show your face anymore. You walk through the hallways, not because you're brave, but because there's nowhere else to go. And then, at the top of the stairs, he's there. The armor is whole, impossibly clean, polished like it's never seen battle, but it's open. The visor up, the plates parted at the joints, nothing inside but shadow, and a thin glint of something that might be bone, or not. The air hums around him, charged with the promise of violence. You feel your heartbeat slow, not from calm, but from fear so deep your body forgets how to panic. He doesn't move. He doesn't have to. You understand now what it means to be hollow, to be flayed of everything but hatred and honor and the need to walk, the need to finish something left undone. You bow. You don't know why, but your knees bend, and your head drops, and something in the air loosens. Just for a moment. When you look up, he's gone, but the armor's still warm, and now it stands in the hallway outside your door. Every night, waiting, you thought you understood the rules. Lights flicker, temperatures drop, ghosts whisper, doors creak, footsteps echo from empty rooms. You expected the chill in your spine, the fog on the mirror, maybe even the voice calling your name at night. You told yourself you could handle it. Because you'd seen the movies, read the stories, repeated the rituals, salt lines, iron nails, candles in a circle. Speak kindly, show no fear, and they'll leave you be. They don't. These ghosts don't care what you've seen or what you've memorized. You could surround yourself in every charm, every prayer, every protective symbol known to man, and they'd still crawl through the cracks in your logic and scream Latin through your teeth while you sleep. They don't respect boundaries because they never had any. The dead don't care about rules written by the living. You learn this on the 13th night, when you wake to your own voice chanting something you don't understand. Not groggy mumbling, not sleep talking, chanting, rhythmic, precise. The syllables stick to your tongue like blood, thick and sweet and sour at once. When you snap awake, your throat burns like you've been screaming into a furnace. Your lips are cracked. Your sheets are wet. You don't know what you said, only that something finished listening. You try to leave. You pack a bag. You don't even bother to fold anything. You run. The car won't start. Not a dead battery. Not engine trouble. The keys melt in your hand. You go back inside because there's nowhere else to go. The castle is cold, but you're sweating. The air hums. You feel watched, not from a corner or a door, but from the ceiling, the walls, the floor beneath your feet. The pressure is constant, not always hostile, just present, like something waiting for a command. You try to fight it. You light candles. You draw salt lines. You recite every protective prayer you can remember. English, Latin. You even hum the hymn your grandmother used to sing when she felt something cross the threshold. It worked then. It doesn't now. The salt line doesn't blow away. It turns black. The candles melt sideways. And the hymn, barely out of your mouth, echoes back to you from a different room, slower and off-key, as if someone else is singing it underwater, laughing between verses. You scream into the empty halls, tell them to stop. Tell them they have no right. Tell them you are not afraid. They show you how wrong you are. The walls bleed. Not red. Not liquid. Something thicker, darker, oozing from the stone like marrow from cracked bone. It drips slowly at first, then faster, forming symbols on the floor you can't read but instinctively fear. They pulse. You step back. You blink. They're gone. But your feet are still wet. You hear a knock on your door that night, then another, then a third. No one's outside. You sleep with the light on. In the morning, your door is open, and every mirror in the castle has been turned to face your bed. You start seeing the faces, not full-bodied apparitions like the movies promised. Faces in the glass, the stone, the water. Some cry, some scream. Some don't move at all. They just stare, unblinking, waiting. You throw out the mirrors, smash the reflective surfaces, but they find others. The glass in the lanterns, the shine of your spoon, the gleam of your own eyes. They whisper rules in your sleep. Not suggestions, not warnings, orders. You will not leave. You will not look behind the red door. You will not speak her name. You will not breathe while the bell tolls. You will not survive the 30th day. You will not survive. You will not survive. Each night, they add another. You try to ignore them. Pretend it's a dream. You wear headphones. You stuff your ears. You drown it out with noise. But the voices find a way in, through vibrations in the floor, through the flicker of flames, through the gnawing silence between thoughts. They learn your rhythms. They know when you blink, when you sleep, when you lie. You read about the hauntings of the past. You find old journals, etched in shaking hands, buried in the walls. They all say the same thing. I followed the rules. I prayed. I bled. I begged. It didn't matter. You see their names carved into the underside of drawers, written backwards in soot on the fireplace stones, stitched into the hems of curtains with red thread that smells like copper and mildew. Some of them are scratched into your bed frame. One of them is yours. You didn't put it there. You burn the bed. It still stands in the morning, untouched, as if the fire happened somewhere else, somewhere realer. By now, the ghosts are constant. Not just seen or heard, but felt. You feel cold fingertips on your spine when you sit, breath against your lips as you try to eat. You chew and taste ash. You drink and taste rot. You stop trying. You write on the walls, not in fear, but in hope that someone else might find it. But the words change. You write, I am alive, and the next morning it says, I was alive. You try again. Help me. Later it reads, let me in. One day, You look in the mirror. Not a real mirror. Just the polished surface of your tea. And you see your face split down the middle, like a cracked mask. Something inside the break is smiling. The rules are broken, not by you, but by them. They were never meant to follow them. They wrote them to teach you obedience, not to protect you, but to trap you in a game you never agreed to play. There's no pattern, no ritual, no banishment. They're not here to teach a lesson or settle old scores. They're here because they can be, because you're here, and they are hungry, not for blood, for attention, for belief, for you. You find the staircase by accident, hidden behind a loose panel in the wine cellar, masked by the smell of rot and the sound of dripping water. The panel slides open with a groan, exposing stone steps that curl down into a blackness so complete it feels like standing at the mouth of a sleeping god. You hesitate, then descend. You don't bring a torch. You don't bring anything. It feels like you shouldn't. The air changes with every step. The further you go, the older it feels. Not just in temperature or dampness, but in something more instinctive, primal. Like the walls remember things they were never supposed to witness. You start to see carvings, crude, jagged symbols scraped into the stone with fingernails or rusted iron. Some are words. Names, maybe. Please. Others are just shapes. Spirals, claws, faces, missing eyes. You try not to touch them. At the bottom, the floor flattens. The light from above has vanished entirely, swallowed by a darkness that doesn't just obscure but consumes. You feel your way forward and realize the walls are no longer smooth. They're scarred. Not from time, but from intention. Gouged, scored, splintered in places where wood once held people still. You find rusted chains embedded into the rock, hanging like abandoned jewelry. Each link hums with tension, like it could still jerk back to life and rattle against the wall at any moment. This isn't a cellar. It's a memory, and it remembers blood. The torture chamber isn't a room. It's a network. Corridors that twist and tighten like veins. Each branch leads to something worse. You pass a bench lined with iron spikes, their tips blackened. A rack that's been shattered from pressure, as though someone pulled too hard and broke the wood before they broke the man. There are stains, some red, some black, some so deep into the stone it looks like the color was always part of it. You find a book, or what's left of one. It's leather-bound, small, nearly falling apart, but the ink is dark and legible. It's not a journal. It's not a record. It's a script. Questions, in Latin, and blank lines where answers should be written. The first page is clean. The second is spotted with blood. The third has no words, just a single sentence scratched into the leather. They confessed when they ran out of teeth. You don't know what you're reading. You don't want to know, but you keep turning the pages. They didn't torture for information. They tortured for clarity, for righteousness, for the shape of truth that only emerges under agony. Confession wasn't a goal. It was a beginning. The tools remain, not displayed, forgotten. A pair of anguish, rusted shut. A thumbscrew bent slightly, like it broke someone's will before it broke itself. You find a chair wrapped in belts of iron, shaped to press inward, to hold the victim still as bones collapsed inward from pressure and heat. You feel your stomach tighten, not in fear, in rage. You don't know whose. There are bones in the drain, not a pile, not an altar, just fragments. One knuckle, a piece of jaw with a molar still intact, a small vertebra that could have belonged to a child. You kneel, not to pray, just to see. You wish you hadn't. The drain still breathes. Just once. Inhale only. You stand and leave that corridor. But the sound follows you. You find writing on the walls in one of the side chambers, scratched shallowly, repeated dozens of times like a mantra or a punishment. The words blur as your eyes adjust, and then resolve into a single sentence, over and over. hundreds of times. They said it would make me clean. You keep moving. Eventually you find the oubliette. A pit carved straight down, deep, narrow, with no footholds. A prison built for time to finish what the torturer started. The edge is ringed with claw marks, stone worn smooth in places from desperate hands trying to find leverage. You peer down. There's still something at the bottom, not moving. Just there. A shape, the size of a body, or what's left of one. You drop a stone. It lands with a thud, not a splash. You hear a breath. Not yours. The chamber goes colder. When you turn to leave, the halls have changed. You thought you came from the left. You swear it. But now the left is bricked, as though the castle decided you needed more time. You follow the new path. It's narrower. The air smells like iron and vinegar. The ceiling lowers until you have to crouch. You feel the weight of it above you, pressing, like the stone wants to remind you who it serves. You reach the final room by crawling. It's circular, clean, somehow. No stains, no bones, just a table in the center and straps along the wall. But there's something painted on the floor in faded ochre, a symbol, a circle wrapped in jagged thorns. At its center, an eye. You don't understand it, but you recognize it. It's on your wrist. You didn't notice it before. A faint mark, like a bruise shaped with intent. You try to rub it off. It doesn't leave. The walls begin to hum. You back away. You whisper a prayer. The chamber laughs. Not loud, not cruel, just tired. Like it's heard centuries of prayers and none of them mattered. You find the staircase again, eventually. Or maybe it finds you. You climb with shaking hands, never looking back. The stone breathes around you, slower now, satisfied. When you reach the top, it's morning. You think you made it, but your hands still smell like rust. And the castle won't stop whispering, confess, confess, confess. The first whisper came from the hearth. Not a voice, not exactly, just a rasp, low and wet, like a tongue dragged across crumbling stone. You thought it was the wind. This place is full of drafts, all of them cold and most of them wrong. But the second whisper said your name. You didn't tell anyone your name. The fireplace hadn't been lit in days, but ash trembled on the floor like something breathing beneath it. You backed away slowly, every instinct pulling tight in your chest. And then the sound stopped. It didn't fade. It stopped, like it had finished checking to see if you were listening. That night, you don't sleep. Not because of the cold or the creaking or the knocking in the ceiling, but because the walls murmur. Not loud, not clear, but steady. You try to tell yourself it's just the stone settling. You even pretend to believe it for an hour. Then you find the brick. You weren't looking for anything. You just leaned against the wall in the hallway near the chapel, and it moved. A tiny shift, like something sighed. You press it again. The brick slides inward, slow and smooth. A sound follows, a hiss, like breath escaping a throat too long closed. Inside is a cavity, just wide enough to fit an arm. You shouldn't reach in. You do anyway. Your fingers brush cloth, not fresh, not old, preserved. You pull it out. It's a scrap of robe, dark brown with a frayed hem, stiff with something long dried. A cross hangs from the end of it, the kind carved by hand, unvarnished, uneven. There's something etched into the wood, but it's not scripture. It's a name, Father Silas. You've never heard of him, but the castle has. You find the second hidden compartment 3 days later, then a third. By the end of the week, you've found 9. Each one holds something different. A child's rosary snapped at the clasp, a knotted rope soaked through with wax, a jawbone missing its teeth, pages from a diary, written in Latin so frantic the ink has torn through the parchment, all of them hidden in the walls, all of them buried like shame. You start seeing the man in your dreams, tall, thin, cloaked. You never see his face, only the hands, always clasped in prayer but stained red to the wrist. He stands in doorways, never enters, just waits and waits and waits. One night you dream of bricks. You are laying them, one by one, sealing something behind the wall. You hear sobbing, screaming. You tell yourself it's necessary. You tell yourself it's mercy. When you place the final brick, your hands are no longer your own. They are his. You try to find records, but they're gone. There's a whole year missing from the chapel's history, a year carefully removed. The dates skip from spring to spring, as if nothing happened in between. As if the silence should not be questioned. The whispers get worse. Now they follow you, not just in the chapel or the hallways, but in your room, in your bed, in the places you thought were safe. You close your eyes and hear them behind the plaster, 100 mouths moving in unison just beyond the surface. You peel the wallpaper in one corner and find writing beneath it. Not ink, blood. Absolve me. It's written again and again, layered, desperate. Not the plea of a man seeking forgiveness, the demand of one who believes he's owed it. The priest didn't bless this castle. He buried it. You find his quarters behind a wall in the east wing, a forgotten chamber, sealed with brick from the inside. It takes you half a day to chip through. The air behind it is heavy with rot and incense, the sick sweet perfume of grief that never left. There's no body, but there's a chair, still upright, facing a wall covered in script, carved straight into stone. Each line of scripture twists the longer you stare, until even the most familiar prayers bleed into nonsense. You blink. One of the sentences moves. You turn away and vomit. On the floor is a journal, real this time, written in a slow, precise hand. The ink begins neat. Confessions, names, sins. But as the pages turn, the handwriting changes, slants, breaks. By the final entry, the lines are nothing but scratches pressed deep into the paper, as if the hand holding the pen was no longer human. The last words, if you can call them that, are etched with something sharp. They will not stay buried. You start hearing footsteps behind the walls. Not rats, not settling stone, footsteps. You press your ear to the cold brick and hear them pacing, stopping, turning, following you. When you sleep, you wake to find dust patterns on your floor, shapes of bare feet dragging in slow circles. One night you wake to the sound of breathing inches from your face. You strike a match and see no one, but the wall beside your bed is damp, and when you press your hand against it, it exhales. You leave the castle for a day, just to breathe air that hasn't passed through a throat long dead. But the sound follows, the whispers, in the trees, in the hotel walls, in the silence between street sounds. When you check your luggage, the priest's journal is inside. You didn't pack it. When you return, the walls seem closer, not metaphorically, literally. You measure the hallway and find it half a foot narrower than the week before. The ceiling in your room dips just enough to make you hunch. The chapel echoes longer now, like the stone is stretching, swallowing sound slower, savoring it. They're pressing in, not to trap you, to remember you. You were never meant to be here. But now that you are, the castle has begun to wake, and the priest, what's left of him, has begun to stir in the walls he loved more than God. You hear him pray sometimes. Not for salvation, not for peace, but for silence. He doesn't get it. Neither will you. She was waiting for you before you ever stepped foot inside the castle. Not in the courtyard, not in the crumbling great hall, or beneath the oil-dark tapestries that still hang like drying hides. She waits in the wing that the servants won't clean, the one with the locked door, rust blooming from the hinges like a wound no one bothers to dress. You asked about it once, and the caretaker went quiet, just stared at you with those glassy, unblinking eyes, then turned away like you'd asked about something obscene. The key turns slower than it should. The lock fights you, like it's been taught not to open for the living. When it clicks, the sound echoes longer than it should, longer than the dimensions of the hallway can explain. You step inside. The room isn't large. It might have been once. Now it leans, sags inward like it's exhausted from keeping its secrets. The air is still, not stale, arrested. The kind of stillness you only find where breath has long been forbidden. She's not in the room, but her story is. It's scratched into the plaster, beginning behind the bed and curling up the wall in lines so faint you miss them at first. No ink, no paint, just nail or bone. You lean in. The words are Latin, broken, jumbled with local dialects that don't translate cleanly. But you recognize enough to understand the shape of it. A woman, a noblewoman, a widow with land and silver, and a name that carried weight in rooms where no one spoke above a whisper. She was kind, then clever, then alone. That was the problem. A drought came, then a blight. The peasants starved. She didn't. She rationed. She planned. And because she survived, she was called unnatural. Because her fields bore fruit, she was accused of seduction. Because she didn't die, she was accused of magic. They came at night. Not soldiers. Men with torches and hoods, and the kind of authority that doesn't need to prove itself. They dragged her from her chamber and stripped her of every symbol of her station. Jewelry, titles, her own name. Then they placed the iron mask over her face and locked it shut. Not a theatrical thing, not ornate. It wasn't meant for drama. It was a punishment, a burial, a prison made of cold, airless metal meant to erase a person from the world one breath at a time. But she didn't die, not right away. They kept her in this room, alone, silent. The mask sealed tight, but not perfectly. She learned to scream through the cracks, not loudly, not in ways the guards would understand. But the castle heard. The stone, the wood, the dust in the beams. They heard, and they remembered. You find the mask on a pedestal in the far corner. You don't know why it's there. No one should keep that kind of thing. But someone did. The iron is black now, rusted in patterns that almost look like veins. You don't touch it. You hear breathing. Not behind you. Around you. A soft draw and release, like the walls are sighing in rhythm. You turn, slowly, and the air thickens. The doorway is darker than before, narrower. The corners of the room seem to stretch upward, warping just slightly, as if you're being watched from every angle at once. Then you hear the echo, not a word, not even a sound you can place, just a vibration, metallic and low, rattling the floorboards beneath your feet. It passes through your bones like a warning or a welcome. The mask is no longer empty. She doesn't appear all at once. The room just darkens around the shape of her, a figure in black, motionless in the corner where the light won't go. She doesn't move. She doesn't need to. The air moves for her. Every breath you take feels borrowed. You try to speak, apologize, explain. But the moment your lips part, she shifts. Just a flicker. Her head tilts. The echo grows sharper. She doesn't want words. She wants silence. She wants you to feel it pressing against your mouth, against your chest, like the weight of iron sealed with intent. You back away. She follows without moving. You see her eyes through the slits in the mask. Not sockets. Eyes. Alive. Angry. Her story doesn't end in that room. Not entirely. Some said they heard the sound of chains long after she died, that the walls wept black water whenever someone lied in her name, that women who passed too close to the castle during childbirth would see flashes of iron and feel their mouths seal shut. You blink, and she's closer. The mask hums. You can hear her. Now, not with your ears, but with something deeper, something behind your ribs. Not a voice, but a question. It lives in your spine, in your blood, in the pit of your stomach curling tight with terror. Will you speak for me? You don't answer. She doesn't need you to. The castle does. It begins to vibrate, small at first. A tremble in the stone, then a rattle in the glass of the windows. The walls pulse, each heartbeat slower than the last. The floor beneath you groans. You run, not because you think you can escape, but because you hope the motion will slow the fear. It doesn't. The door barely opens wide enough for your shoulders. You scrape through it, skin tearing on the frame, and as it slams shut behind you, the mask screams. No sound, just pressure, a scream you feel in your teeth. Later, you will return to that room and find it gone. No door, no mask, no marks on the walls. You'll wonder if you imagined it. You'll wonder if it imagined you. But at night, the echo returns, low, steady, like breath against metal, and your name, spoken without lips. The tower doesn't rise above the castle. It sinks. At first glance, you'd call it a well. A stone ring in the corner of the ruined courtyard, mostly swallowed by weeds and the passage of time. The iron grate that once covered it is gone, twisted off and discarded in the grass like something that tried to hold its shape and failed. It looks harmless. A circle of stone, maybe 6 feet wide, surrounded by moss and silence. You walked past it 3 times without noticing. You don't remember the 4th time. Something made you stop. Maybe it was the chill that bit through your coat despite the sun. Maybe it was the birds, which had all gone silent. Maybe it was just the sound, a whisper that felt like a breath against your neck, though no wind stirred. You turned and looked down into the well, expecting darkness. What you found was deeper than dark. It wasn't empty. The light from above doesn't reflect. It bends. The stone inside descends in tight, perfect spirals. Steps too narrow for comfort, carved directly into the shaft wall, slick with condensation and centuries. You call out, half joking, testing your own voice in the echo. It doesn't bounce back. It drops like a stone into water, and then it screams. Not your voice, something else, from far below. The sound doesn't fade. It climbs. You step back. You don't look away. You tell yourself it's just acoustics, just the castle playing tricks again. But the scream changes pitch as it rises, splits, folds in on itself. It's not a person. Not anymore. The locals call it the tower with no bottom. Not because no one's found the bottom, because people who try don't come back. You ask the caretaker about it. He tells you it's been sealed 3 times. Once with a grate, once with stone, once with holy relics from the chapel. Each time torn away, crumbled, or gone without trace. They stopped trying after a shepherd boy fell in and was never heard from again, except on full moons. That's when the screaming comes back. You make the mistake of staying up 1 full moon later, just to see, just to listen. You don't mean to sit by the window. You don't mean to leave the curtains open, but you do. And just past midnight, it begins. Not loud, not all at once. It starts with a breath, wet and hollow, like wind through lungs that shouldn't exist. Then the moaning, then the howling, not of wolves, not even of men, of things remembering pain with mouths that no longer fit their faces. Some cry in Latin, some bark like animals. Some don't make sounds at all, just the dragging of limbs and claws and fingers against stone. You see movement in the courtyard, faint shapes, blacker than the night, pulling themselves from the shaft. Long-limbed, wrong-jointed. They don't walk, they pour, spilling out of the well like oil. Some crawl, some float inches above the earth. None cast shadows. They don't roam far. They stop just past the well's edge and look up, like they're waiting. For what? You close the curtains. You light every candle in your room. You whisper a prayer you don't remember learning. And in the morning, the courtyard is empty again. Almost. A child's shoe sits beside the well. There's no child in the village who admits to owning it. You try not to think about it. You move your bedroom to the west wing, as far as possible from the courtyard. You stop asking questions. You stop looking out the window. You leave offerings at the chapel for something you don't believe in, hoping it's enough to stay unseen. But the well waits. You dream about it now, not the top. Never the top. You dream of falling. The spiral staircase becomes a throat, swallowing you step by step. The walls narrow. The air thickens. The silence sharpens. You descend with hands outstretched, touching stone that pulses like muscle. The screams don't echo down there. They curl. They cling. They speak your name in tongues you've never heard, but somehow understand. At the bottom, if there is one, is a door. You never open it. You always wake up sweating, but each time, the door is closer. The castle's foundation runs deeper than it should. The blueprints don't show it. The historical records don't mention it. But the stones feel older down there, older than the rest of the structure, older than the land. There are symbols etched into the lowest layers, shapes like roots twisted into runes, circles within circles, teeth carved from stone. One night, the scream doesn't fade. You hear it long after the moon has set. A wail that climbs through the corridors, threads through keyholes, curls into your ears like steam. You follow it, against your will, down the stairs, through the great hall, out into the yard. The courtyard smells like rot and salt. The grass is slick with something that stains your shoes. You reach the well. The scream stops. There's something at the edge. Fingers, too long, too many joints. Bone and tendon without flesh, flexing like a spider's leg. They reach up and knock on the stone rim, twice, then vanish. You back away, but the sound of stone grinding on stone follows you. Footsteps not your own, echoing half a second behind every move. You reach your room. You bar the door. You wait. The scream doesn't return that night, but neither does the silence. Now, when you walk the halls, the sound of the well comes with you. A faint moan, a breath, a reminder. You didn't open the door, but the tower did. The great hall should be empty. Dust thickens on the long table like a second tablecloth. The banners droop, the candelabras hang crooked, and the scent of mildew clings to the carved beams like mold on breath. You walk past the entrance during the day and catch nothing but cold air and silence. You think it's just another ruin. Until midnight. Something shifts when the clocks strike 12. Not loudly, not even noticeably, just a soft pressure behind your eyes, like the air has turned and noticed you. The great hall's double doors creak without wind. Light flickers under the crack, golden and warm, like hearth light. You didn't light any fires, and yet, the scent of roasted meat bleeds into the corridor. You know better. You tell yourself not to look, but the hunger isn't yours. It's in your mouth anyway. The doors open without resistance. Inside, the long table is full, not just with food, but though there is that too much of it, heaped and steaming as if pulled from ovens that haven't worked in centuries. Platters glisten with honey-glazed birds, with wheels of cheese that sweat under candlelight, with fruits that drip juice onto silver trays. There is wine, redder than it should be, viscous, almost black. You can smell rosemary and blood, and then there are the guests. They sit in silence at the long table, hands folded or fingers twitching beside their plates. None of them breathe. Their faces sag, skin the color of candle wax, lips gray and tight as if stitched. Some are little more than skeletons in velvet, others bloated in their finery, rot clinging to the lace of their collars. They do not eat. They are waiting. The seats at the head and foot of the table remain empty. You feel the pull. It isn't your name they whisper. It's your hunger. that quiet, restless place in your gut that no modern meal ever satisfies. It draws you forward like a hook between your ribs. You step closer. The smell is stronger now. Salt and decay mixed with warm bread and apples. The contradiction makes your teeth ache. One of the guests turns their head. The motion is slow, brittle. Vertebrae crack. Skin splits along the cheek as the jaw moves. The smile is small and unnatural. The eyes are glass. They nod toward the empty chair. You sit. You don't mean to. You're just tired, or curious, or maybe the chair was already under you. Either way, your fingers are on the silverware, and your plate is full, and the hall is warm. The fire in the hearth roars without sound. Shadows dance across the stone. A faint tune hums through the rafters. Violins, but off, just slightly out of tune, like something remembered from childhood and repeated wrong. You raise the fork. Steam curls from the meat. The color is right. The smell, mostly right. The texture, not. Too soft, too wet. You chew. The warmth spreads, not through your body, through your memory. For 1 second, you're elsewhere. A child again. In some old kitchen, somewhere far from this place. Laughter. Hands over yours. A feast with people you loved and forgot. The sensation is so real it bleeds. Then it fades, and you realize the guest beside you is watching. Her mouth is sewn shut with twine. Her hair is white with cobwebs. One of her eyes is missing. Still, she lifts her goblet. It's filled to the rim with that same dark wine, thick and pulsing like something alive. She toasts you. Others follow. Across the table, another corpse lifts a spoonful of stew and lets it dribble onto the untouched plate below. He raises his brow, almost conspiratorially, as though you're all in on the same joke. You've never laughed less in your life. Then the music swells, and the feast begins. Forks move, goblets tip. Food vanishes from plates that do not lift. You hear the chewing, wet, rhythmic. Some don't use their mouths at all. Just press their hands into the food until it's soaked into their sleeves, their skin, their bones. The guests do not speak. They only feed. You try to stand. Your chair groans but doesn't move. The guest to your right takes your hand. Cold, papery, gentle. She leans in, and through that sealed mouth, she whispers, "Eat." The air thickens. You drop the fork. The room goes still. All heads turn toward you. The music stops. And for the first time, the sound of breathing returns to the room, not from the guests. From behind the throne at the head of the table, it steps forward. Tall, too tall. Robes stitched from shadows and moth wings. Its face hidden behind a plague mask carved from polished bone. It doesn't walk. It glides, trailing frost along the stones. In its hand, a goblet crusted with rubies. It offers it to you. You refuse. The scream is silent, but it splits the air. The fire dies. The food rots in an instant. The guests rise. Some shudder. Some fall apart. One collapses into a cloud of dust that howls as it disperses. Their chairs scrape as they push back from the table, but none leave. They advance. You're already on your feet. You don't remember standing. You don't remember the door swinging wide, or your legs pounding across the threshold, or the way the hall narrowed behind you like a throat trying to swallow. You only remember the breath. Yours, choking on itself. You slam the door shut. You run. You don't stop until you're in your room with every candle burning and every mirror turned to face the wall. In the morning, the great hall is empty. No table. No food, just a long stretch of dust and stone and silence. But in your throat, the taste of honeyed meat still lingers, and when you open your hand, you're holding a silver fork. The mirror should have been useless. It hangs above the wash basin in your chamber, framed in blackened iron, crusted with the quiet rust of forgotten years. The glass itself is cloudy, warped around the edges, as if time took a breath and exhaled mildew into its silvered lungs. You only glance at it on the first night, just long enough to recognize yourself in that dim, distorted shimmer. But it's enough, because it smiles. You didn't. You tell yourself the angle was off. The light, the exhaustion, the slow bleed of unease that's been leaking into your bones since you arrived. You laugh, just to prove it was nothing, but the sound scrapes your throat. Your lips don't lift, not even a twitch. The reflection keeps smiling. It doesn't feel playful. It feels hungry. You leave the room. You sleep somewhere else, or try to, but there's no safety in stone. The castle is a maze of drafts and footsteps that never match yours, of doors that shut just before you reach them, of whispers tucked inside your ears like damp cotton. You return in the morning, more out of necessity than courage, and the mirror is the same, silent, staring. You cover it with a cloth. You shouldn't have, because that night, the cloth is on the floor. You didn't move it. No one else lives here. The windows were latched, the door locked, the fireplace unlit, but the cloth lies like a discarded shroud at the base of the wash basin, wrinkled and damp, as if someone pressed it to their face and wept through it. The mirror is clear now. No fog, no mildew, just your face, sharp and vivid and wrong. You wave. It doesn't. You lift your hand again, slow, cautious, as though testing a snake for movement. Your reflection meets your eyes. Your hand rises. It follows, a beat late, not a mirror image, a mimic. You lower your arm. It doesn't. The smile curls wider. That's when you notice the eyes. Not your eyes. Slightly too large, slightly too wet, slightly too still. It blinks once, slow and deliberate. You don't. You start to speak. It opens its mouth, but it doesn't speak with your voice. It mouths something else. Let me out. You reel back. You run. You leave the room again, but this time you don't return in the morning. You don't sleep. You sit in the library with the lights on, drinking something sharp and bitter, trying to convince yourself that you're still awake, still real. You find a book. A ledger, handwritten, bound in red leather. It belonged to the previous owner, or one before him. It doesn't matter. You skim through the pages and find a familiar phrase scratched repeatedly in the margins. Don't trust the mirror. It learned my face. You decide to break it. You return with a hammer gripped tight in your fist, the cold weight of it offering a false sort of safety. The mirror waits, uncovered, smiling. This time, it's already moving when you arrive, tilting its head in the opposite direction as yours, fingers twitching against the invisible glass. You see it mouth something new. Please. You hesitate, then swing. The hammer hits the surface, and the glass explodes. Not in shards, but in slivers, in threads of silver light that twist outward like cracks in reality. The room howls. The mirror doesn't break. It opens. The surface pulls inward like a sucking wound, and for one sickening moment, you see depth behind it. A hallway of mirrors, all versions of you, all frozen in mid-scream, mouths agape, faces blistered with the same grin. They're trying to escape, not into your world, into your skin. You stagger back as fingers reach through. Your fingers, pale and wrong, crawling spider-like from the frame, scrabbling across the basin, groping for purchase on the wood. One eye follows, then part of a jaw, wet and glistening with something that isn't blood, but isn't not blood. You throw the hammer again. This time it hits. The mirror shatters. Real glass this time. Real sound. 1,000 splinters spraying across the floor like frozen screams. The fingers vanish. The thing collapses into itself with a final sucking gasp. Silence returns. You exhale. You do not cry. You sweep up the pieces, bury them in the garden, salt the ground, say a prayer, all the proper steps. And still, the next morning, A new mirror hangs above the wash basin. Identical frame, identical glass. You stare into it and see yourself. Yourself. You smile, just to check, and the reflection smiles back. A second too late. In the beginning, the rats were just rats, scurrying across the stones, fat with mildew, and feasting on forgotten crumbs in the pantry. They didn't flinch when you entered a room. They didn't scatter at footsteps. They didn't care that you were alive. If anything, they seemed mildly annoyed that you'd interrupted whatever dreadful congress of filth they were conducting beneath the floorboards. You learned to step around them, to ignore the rustling in the walls, to pretend that the little black droppings on the kitchen counter were nothing more than reminders that this place had a pulse. But then they changed. It started in the chapel. The door creaked open in the middle of the night. Not with ceremony, not with dread, just a hollow, slow groan that sounded almost like breath. You were walking past on your way to the library when it caught your eye. Movement. Tiny, fast, desperate. A stream of rats, dozens of them, pouring from the open chapel like smoke, like blood rushing from a wound. They didn't look at you. They didn't care about you. They were running from something. You followed them, not because you're brave, but because you were too tired to be smart. Their little bodies clattered against the stone, claws clicking like 1,000 tiny clocks. Some ran with tufts of fur missing. One had no eyes. Another dragged its body behind it like a wrung-out rag. They vanished into cracks in the stone, into holes you hadn't noticed before, into the belly of the castle that's never really empty. You stood there, alone, watching the chapel door, and then it shut, not slammed, closed, soft and final, like a parent tucking in a child they no longer love. The next morning, you checked inside. Dust and silence. The altar untouched. The stone floor cool and dry. Nothing had changed, except for the new set of scratch marks on the inside of the door. They looked like claws or fingers. After that, the rats started talking. Not with mouths, not with voices, but through motion, through patterns, through presence. They would sit in your doorway at night, 5 or 6 of them, lined up neatly like parishioners at a sermon. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. When you stirred, they scattered, not in fear, but as if dismissed. You found them in the library next. Pages chewed, specific pages, always the same names missing from the margins, always the same phrases gnawed into oblivion. Beneath the stair, voices through ash. Old things, kept hungry. They weren't random, they were editing. One night, you heard them speaking, not in English, not in any language you've ever heard, but your bones understood. The cadence of it, the rhythm, a message not meant for ears but for marrow. They spoke in the walls, under the bed, behind the hearth, whispered secrets in a voice made from 100 small throats, each sound stitched together from hunger and warning. You pressed your ear to the stones and heard something else, a reply, not words, just a breath, long, wet, smiling. You slept in the tower that night, high above the chapel, above the places they ran from. You lit candles, drew a circle in chalk, whispered the names of saints you never believed in. You dreamed of rats crawling into your mouth. You woke with blood on your tongue and your ears ringing with a single word. Soon, you tried to leave. You packed your things. Not all of them, just enough. The bare minimum. A coat, some money, a key. You didn't look in the mirror, didn't say goodbye, didn't even shut the door behind you. The path through the woods was clear, but the rats were waiting, not blocking your path, just there, dozens of them, hundreds, perched on roots, nestled in the branches, hanging from trees like fruit, all watching, all silent. And then they parted. They let you go, but you didn't, because 20 feet down the path, the air changed. It didn't grow colder. It grew still, heavier, And somewhere behind your eyes, something whispered, "Leave, and I'll follow." You turned around, and the rats watched you smile. Now, they stay closer. They sleep in the corners of your room, curled in little spirals like sentinels. They don't flinch when you move. They don't blink when you curse. They just wait. You're not sure if they serve it or fear it or both. You're not sure if they're even rats anymore. Tonight, one sits on your pillow. Its fur is soaked. Not with water, with something darker. It smells like the inside of a crypt. It climbs to your ear, and it speaks. This time, the words are clear. This time, they are in your voice. It says, "He's almost here." Then it curls beside you and sleeps. You do not. At first, it was nothing. A shift in the silence. A change in how the dark pressed in after you blew out the candle. You were used to the creaks of old timber, the moan of wind through arrow slits, the soft patter of rats treating the halls like their private kingdom. You'd already heard worse, seen worse, but this was different. The sound didn't echo, it didn't drift, it curled. The first night, you thought it was breath, shallow and slow, the kind of breath a child makes while pretending to be asleep, almost convincing, almost still. You pulled the blanket up over your shoulder and told yourself it was your imagination, just the castle settling, the weight of your fear compacted into sound. But then it said your name, not loud, not even clear. Just a scratch of syllables from the floorboards beneath your bed. Not quite a whisper, more like someone trying to remember how to use a mouth. You didn't move, you didn't breathe. You waited until morning, and you didn't sleep. By sunrise, it was gone. You checked. Of course you did. You lit a taper, knelt down, lifted the curtain of fabric that hung like a shroud around the ancient frame. Nothing. Just dust. Just wood. Just the terrible quiet you hoped meant safety. But the second night, it came back, and it had learned your name better. This time it said it twice. Once in the voice of your mother. Once in a voice you didn't recognize, but felt. You tried to ignore it. You pressed a pillow over your ears. You whispered a prayer you hadn't said in years. You cursed the castle. You cursed yourself. You fell asleep at dawn and dreamed of your own funeral, attended by shadows and veils. On the third night, you spoke back. You said, "Who are you?" It answered with laughter. Not loud, not manic, just dry, slow, and close. Closer than it should have been. You shot upright, heart hammering, body slick, with a fear that didn't feel new. You didn't check under the bed this time. You knew better. You slept sitting up in the chair by the fire, knees tucked to your chest, like a child hiding from thunder. You dreamed again. This time, you saw the bed. From underneath, you saw yourself asleep on top of it, limbs twitching like a dying thing. You saw the boards above you ripple like water, and then hands push through. Long fingers, yellow with rot, nails sharp as bone. They hovered just inches from your back. The whisper came again, but now it was in your ear, a wet sound, like someone chewing teeth. Stay. You woke with bruises on your arms shaped like fingers. After that, the whispering grew bolder. It spoke before you even lay down. It mocked you, repeated the things you'd said to yourself in the dark. It sang songs you hadn't heard since childhood, but warped, twisted, each note bent like old metal. It called you names no one else knew, names buried in letters and past mistakes and sins you never confessed. And you kept listening. You told yourself you were studying it, that you needed to understand, to protect yourself. But deep down, you knew you were addicted. There was something ancient about its cadence, something that reached into your spine and tugged like a marionette string. When it spoke, your breath caught in your throat, like a secret. Then one night, it stopped. Silence returned, but not peace. You waited for it to speak, to hiss, to breathe. It didn't, and that's when the dread began to bloom. Because now, You weren't scared of the whisper. You were scared of the quiet. You tried to sleep anyway. You lay down, pulling the blanket to your chin like a shield, eyes glued to the ceiling, back stiff. The fire had gone out. The cold crept in, but nothing moved. Then you blinked, and when you opened your eyes again, the bed was gone. Not broken, not moved, gone. You were lying flat on the floorboards, and they were warm. Too warm. Breathing. The whisper came back. Not from beneath you now, but inside you, coiling through your teeth, between your ribs, behind your eyes. It wasn't speaking words anymore. It didn't need to. It just hummed. A low, trembling hum that matched the rhythm of your heartbeat. You couldn't move. You couldn't scream. You couldn't even blink again. The boards beneath your cheek pulsed, and you understood, too late, that it had been waiting for this. Not to frighten you, to wear you down, to pull you low enough, to make you lie still. Your name came again, but this time it wasn't a question. It was a command. Stay, and you did. All night. Morning found you still there, sprawled on the floor, cheek red with the imprint of nails that were not your own. You dragged yourself up, moved the bed back to its place, lit every candle in the room, carved holy words into the wood with a knife dulled from trying. But tonight, the whisper didn't wait. It started as soon as the sun dipped below the forest. It knew you were listening. It knew you'd always listen now. And it laughed. The hallway isn't long, but it feels like it stretches further every day. When you first arrived at the castle, you could walk its length in 20 steps. Stone walls, rusting sconces, the same old tapestries faded with mildew and time. It led nowhere special, just a servant stairwell long since collapsed and a sealed window crusted with centuries of dust. You'd barely glanced down it on your arrival tour. A dead end, you were told. A part of the castle left to rot, forgotten by everyone but spiders and shadows. But this morning, something changed. It began before you saw it. You were brushing your teeth at the cracked basin when you felt it. A pressure in your ears, like the moment before a scream. The candles around your mirror flickered inward instead of out. Not wind, not draft. A pull. Something inhaling from deep inside the stone. You tried to ignore it, but the feeling followed you like wet clothes, down the hallway, past the tapestry, and there it was. A door, not just any door. You would have remembered this one. It didn't belong. All the other doors in the castle are crude things. Arched, wooden, iron-banded, half-rotted at the bottom from damp centuries. This one is smooth, pale, almost white. No rust, no hinges, no handle, just a single keyhole shaped like an open eye. You stopped. You stared. Your memory, already strained by sleepless nights and too many whispered nothings, scrambled through old images, floor plans, maps scribbled in the library's margins. You even remembered the tour guide's casual wave down this exact corridor. No rooms past this point, he'd said, collapsed ages ago, and yet the door stood there, whole, waiting. You didn't touch it at first. You're not stupid. You backed away, slow, measured, like walking away from a wolf pretending to sleep. You returned to the blueprint that came with your inheritance papers. You scoured it with shaking fingers, tracing every hallway, nook, and stair. No door, no room, no explanation. By noon, the castle felt different, like it knew you had seen something you weren't supposed to. The floors creaked in patterns. The bells in the tower chimed 13 times at noon. Flies buzzed in perfect circles around the food you hadn't touched. And somewhere behind the walls, something coughed. You returned to the hallway. The door was still there, breathing, not visibly, not theatrically, but undeniably. If you stood close enough, you could feel it in your chest. A slow rise and fall, like standing beside a great sleeper buried just beneath the plaster. You leaned in without meaning to, driven by something beyond curiosity. The keyhole exhaled cold air, sharp with iron and something sweet, almost floral, like the scent of rotted lilacs. You whispered, "Hello," and it answered. A single knock, soft, from the inside. You ran, not far, because there's nowhere far to run in a place that folds space around you like a trap, but far enough to believe, for a moment, that distance meant safety. You slept in the library, curled in a pile of books about saints and sigils, surrounded by half-burnt candles and symbols you didn't understand. But when you woke, you knew the door was still there, and it was closer, not by much, just a foot, maybe two, but closer. It had moved. The hallway is stone. There's no track, no space, no mechanism for motion. And yet, the door had shifted. It had crept like a shadow in the night, unnoticed but undeniable. By evening, you stood in front of it again. This time, it knocked first. Twice, you whispered, "What do you want?" It answered with silence, but the silence bent. It bent your thoughts, twisted your spine, filled your mouth with the taste of old oil and candle wax. The air around you grew heavy. The candle in your hand flickered violently, then went out. You stumbled back, heart roaring like a hunted thing. Your back hit the far wall. The door hadn't moved. You blinked. Now it had. No more than a few inches. Just enough to remind you that it was watching, that it heard you, that it knew your name. You tried to write about it in your journal, but when you opened the pages, they were already filled. Not in your handwriting, not in any language you recognized. Just lines and lines of looping symbols, drawn in ink that smelled like bone dust. You tore out the pages, burned them. The next morning, the door was gone. You laughed. Too hard, too long. Relief flooded your body like heat in winter. The hallway was empty. The tapestry hung in its usual spot, frayed and silent. The wall behind it was smooth, unbroken stone. But that night, as you passed the mirror in your room, you saw something strange. The reflection showed the hallway, and the door was there again, closer, always closer. You screamed, not out loud, not with your voice, but inside your chest, where screams are shaped before they're given breath. Now when you sleep, you dream of keys, heavy, rusted, warm with something wet. You dream of a lock that blinks when it's fed. You dream of the door opening, slowly, and you wake to the sound of hinges that shouldn't exist. Tonight, the hallway is shorter, the tapestry is missing, and the door is only 3 feet away. You don't pack a bag because you didn't plan to leave. Not at first. You wake one morning, if you can still call this trembling half-light morning, and the decision arrives fully formed, lodged in your bones like the cold. You will walk out. No goodbye, no ritual, no backward glance, just motion, distance, freedom. Your shoes are already damp before you reach the main doors, though you don't remember stepping in water. You tell yourself it's dew, even though dew doesn't smell like rust and mildew. The door is heavier than you recall. You strain against it, palms aching, shoulders shuddering, and then it gives. Not like a door yielding to force, but like flesh bruising under pressure. The hinges don't groan. They sigh. You step outside. You expect sunrise, a path, something familiar. Instead, the courtyard is wrong. You stand on the threshold and stare at the road ahead, but it isn't ahead anymore. It curls in on itself like a rope pulled too tight, bending back toward the castle gates after only a few dozen paces. The trees lining it stand like sentries, bark slick with something that might once have been sap. You walk it anyway. Of course you do. And within 5 minutes, you're back at the castle steps. You don't panic. Not yet. You retrace your steps slowly, deliberately, past the gnarled oak with the hollow that looks like a screaming mouth, past the patch of brambles clawing at your calves, past the weathered stone marker, etched with words in a language you still can't read, even though you've seen it enough to almost guess. Back to the front gate, you try again. A new route, through the side passage that leads to the western gate, out toward what should be fields and rolling hills. You've seen them on maps, seen them from the highest tower, a patchwork of golden green. You press forward until your knees ache and your breath stings, and you arrive at the main gate. Again, this time, you scream. Not loudly, not a heroic cry of defiance. A small sound, guttural, unformed. It leaks out of you like air from a cracked bellows. You want to cry, but the castle won't let you. It takes your tears, like it takes everything else. Quietly, greedily, without thanks. You turn around, and the castle is closer, no longer waiting passively, not looming, just near, as if it followed you. You sprint, you don't care where. Through the woods, down a ravine slick with moss and roots, across shallow streams that feel warm even in the cold. You run until your legs shake, until your lungs blister, until the sun bleeds away behind clouds too thick for daylight. And then you trip, because of course you do. You fall hard, cheek grinding into gravel, hands raw, ankle twisted. You don't move for a long time. You listen. The forest is silent except for your heartbeat and something else. Breathing, not yours. It's behind you before you turn. The castle. Not a full structure, just parts of it. A wall, a window, a sliver of spire poking up between two trees like the bones of a buried god. You rise slowly and look around, and there's the front gate. You're back again. You lose time after that. Minutes, hours, a day. The light never changes. The sky never clears. The birds don't sing here. You try to mark your steps, laying stones, breaking branches. But the next time you return, the branches are unbroken. The stones spell something else. Your name, maybe. You test the carriage road, wide and rutted with the memory of wheels. You test the servant path through the kitchens, with the old hedge maze curling around its edge. You test the tunnel in the crypt, half collapsed, stinking of earth and bone and salt. They all lead back. You scream again, louder this time, and the sound doesn't echo. It folds, collapses into the stone. You beat your fists against the door until your knuckles bleed. The castle opens for you anyway. Inside, it's darker than it should be. Candles you didn't light flicker in their holders. The air smells different, more copper, less mold. The walls feel closer, and the rooms, they shift. You pass the study and find the chapel instead. The tower stairs now spiral down. The great hall has no doors, only curtains. You are not disoriented. The castle is reorienting around you. You want to scream again, but you've forgotten how. That night, the moon is red. You don't sleep. You sit by the fire that refuses to warm you, staring into flames that hiss your name in dead languages. You hold the maps. You redraw them. You burn them. You pray. You threaten. You beg. And the next morning, a suitcase waits by the door. Not yours. Not new. It smells like smoke and rosewater. Inside are clothes, clean and pressed, in your size but centuries out of style. A letter rests on top, sealed with wax shaped like an open eye. It says nothing. You leave it behind. You try to walk out barefoot, in nothing but your night clothes, just to see if the castle will let you die in the woods. You find yourself back in the hallway outside your room. The same tear in the wallpaper. The same scratch marks at ankle height. The same silence. And then, the realization settles. You were never the heir. You were the offering. The castle didn't forget you. It waited. It starved itself on purpose. It needed you hollow. It needed you scared. It needed you ready. And now every door leads inward. Every stairway descends. The windows show nothing. The mirrors lie. The clocks turn counterclockwise. You try to leave, and the castle laughs. You don't hear it. You feel it. The body can last 3 days without sleep before it begins to unravel. You know this because you've counted every second of it. The first night was easy. Too much adrenaline in your veins, too much fear dragging your heart into overdrive, too much candlelight flickering against the walls like warning signs. You lay awake, ears tuned to every sound, forcing your eyelids apart even when they begged to close. You thought you were in control then. You thought it was willpower keeping you awake. The second night was harder. Your eyes burned. Your hands shook when you tried to pour water from the jug. Shadows blurred, edges of the world softening, but you clung to the fading rope of awareness. You paced. You counted bricks. You whispered hymns, though your throat rasped like sandpaper. Each time your knees buckled, you slapped yourself across the face, desperate to keep from collapsing into the one thing you feared more than death: sleep. Because by then you had realized sleep was no longer yours. You learned it on the morning of the second day, when you found mud on your feet. Not a little. Clumps packed into the cracks of your toes, streaked up your calves, thick enough to leave marks on the floorboards when you staggered from bed. Your arms ached as though you'd been carrying something heavy, and on your palms, bruises bloomed in the shape of rope. You hadn't left the bed, at least, not while you were awake. By the third night, you were a puppet of nerves and shaking muscle, strung together by nothing but fear. You propped your back against the door, every candle you could find blazing, the mirror turned against the wall, the blanket twisted in your fists like a tether to the world. But exhaustion is not an enemy you can fight. It is a tide, and your body is a sinking stone. You held on as long as you could, and still, your head dropped forward, and when you woke, you weren't in your room. You were in the chapel, alone but not alone. The air stank of smoke and iron. The candles on the altar burned with black flames, their light casting no glow, only making the shadows deeper. Your hands were raw, split open across the knuckles. You couldn't breathe right. Something thick clogged your throat, something sour, something sweet. You staggered forward and nearly fell over what lay at your feet. A dead rat, split in half, arranged carefully, precisely, its innards splayed into a circle, its tail stretched straight, like a compass needle. Your breath caught, and you looked down at your hands. They were covered in blood. Not just blood, ink too. The smell of it told you it wasn't ordinary. Oil, ash, bone. The palms of your hands were marked, symbols carved in crude strokes, smeared but deliberate. You tried to scrub them off on your clothes, but the lines only seemed to sink deeper. The realization cut through you like winter air. You hadn't just been walking in your sleep. You had been working, acting, creating. Something had used your body, your hands, your voice, and you had no memory of it. By dawn, you had dragged yourself back to your room. Your reflection in the warped glass grinned at you, lips cracked, eyes hollow, and it mouthed a single word you didn't dare hear. You turned away, too frightened to watch your own mouth shape something you hadn't said. Now the fear isn't that you'll die here. The fear is that you already have, and whatever is walking in your skin at night is all that remains. You wonder what it whispers while your head is bent, what promises it makes on your behalf, what bargains it signs in your blood. You wonder if the villagers already know, if they've already seen you, wandering the grounds at midnight, eyes empty, smile too wide. You haven't slept in 3 days, not because you didn't try, because you did. And every time your eyes close, the castle moves you like a piece on its board, dragging you into rituals older than memory, carving words into walls that change when you wake, digging graves for things that have no bodies. And the worst part? Each morning, the castle is a little different. A chair facing the wrong way, a door that wasn't there yesterday, a trail of dirt across your bed that leads to the window. You don't know what you're building. You don't know who you're feeding. You only know that it is using you, and that when it is finished, you won't wake up at all. Your hands ache again tonight. They itch, the bruises blackening into shapes. You clutch them to your chest, rocking in the chair by the fire, begging yourself not to close your eyes. The flames blur, the walls bend, your heartbeat slows, and in the moment, before you slip under, you hear yourself whisper, in a voice that isn't yours, "It's ready." The first time, you thought you'd dreamed it. You woke to a dull ache in your ribs, the kind of soreness that follows restless sleep, and when you stretched, you felt the sting. Lifting your shirt in the warped mirror by the basin revealed 3 thin scratches, red and angry, running diagonally across your side. Not deep, but precise. Too straight to be an accident, too fresh to be from days before. You pressed your fingertips to them and flinched. They burned like they'd been waiting for you to notice. You searched the room as if an intruder might still be hiding there. You tore the sheets from the bed, inspected every nail jutting from the headboard, examined the stone walls for cracks or sharp edges. Nothing could have done this. Nothing you could explain. Still, you told yourself it didn't matter. Castles are dangerous places. Old wood, old iron, sharp corners everywhere. You wanted to believe you had simply rolled into something in your sleep. That excuse lasted until the next night. Because the next night, it wasn't scratches. It was bruises. You woke on the floor, your body twisted at an angle you didn't remember choosing, the fire long dead in the grate. Your arms ached, purple blotches rising across your wrists as though you'd been grabbed and held down. You traced them with your fingers, shivering at their shape. Not a fall, not an accident. Hands. Something had gripped you hard enough to leave its mark, and you hadn't woken. That was when the fear began to rot you from the inside out. Not fear of death. You'd been courting that since the first night in this place. No, this was worse. This was fear of ownership. The knowledge that something could use your body, hurt your body, and you would never know until it was finished. By the third night, denial was impossible. You woke to pain sharp enough to drag a cry from your throat before you even opened your eyes. The sheets were damp beneath you, sticky, clinging. You rolled onto your side and felt the sting down your back, as though someone had traced a knife across your skin again and again. In the mirror, with a candle trembling in your hand, you saw the truth. Words carved into your flesh. The letters were crude but legible, forming across your shoulders in jagged script. Mine. The candle slipped from your hand and went out. You pressed yourself against the wall, shaking, trying to reach the wound, trying to scrub the word away, as if your blood was ink and could be erased. But no matter how you clawed at it, no matter how you whispered denials into the dark, the letters stayed. Your own body had become a message board, and you weren't the one writing. You stopped sleeping after that, or tried to. You propped yourself up in the chair with your back against the door, knife in hand, staring at the flames as though they might protect you. But exhaustion is stronger than fear, and every time your eyes closed, the castle took its chance. Now you wake with new marks each day, some shallow, some deep. A line across your thigh, as though testing the sharpness of a blade. A circle around your ankle, like a shackle half remembered. Bruises in the shape of fingers across your throat. Sometimes the wounds aren't even wounds. Sometimes they're patterns, spirals, crosses, symbols you find later in the margins of old manuscripts in the library, the same symbols the priest carved into the walls of his chamber. You begin to realize they aren't just hurting you, they're writing you, every cut, every bruise, every scar, a sentence in a story you can't read. You catch yourself staring into space for long stretches, lips moving silently, as if reciting something you've never learned. Your hands twitch, curling into shapes, sketching letters on the table without chalk, without ink. Sometimes your mouth tastes of salt and iron when you wake, and once you find ash beneath your fingernails. You don't remember leaving your bed, but you know you did. The worst part isn't the pain. It's the intimacy. These wounds aren't attacks. They're conversations. Someone, or something, is speaking to you through your own flesh, and you're starting to understand. Not all of it. Not yet, but fragments. Enough to feel the meaning sliding beneath your skin like a parasite. The scratches aren't random. The bruises aren't warnings. The words aren't commands. They are claims. Last night you woke to blood pooling at the base of your spine. This time, the letters were longer. Messier. You stood before the mirror with your teeth clenched against the pain and read them backwards. You couldn't finish. Your throat closed. Your knees buckled. You don't know what language it was, but it wasn't for you, and yet it was inside you. You think about leaving, though you already know you can't. You imagine staggering down the road, body covered in wounds you can't explain, and collapsing in the dirt outside the village. You imagine trying to show the villagers the scars, begging them to understand. You know what they would say. They would say, it wasn't the castle that marked you. They would say, you carved them yourself. You're not sure they'd be wrong. Tonight, as you sit by the dwindling fire, you feel it again. That prickle on your skin, the cold line across your shoulder blade. You reach behind you with trembling fingers, already knowing what you'll find. Your flesh is split. The wound so fresh it weeps across your hand. You rise, slowly, to face the mirror. There it is. Another word. Not mine this time. Ready. It begins so softly you don't notice at first. Not with a scream. Not with your body levitating above the bed, or your eyes rolling white into the back of your skull. No spinning heads, no thunder cracking through the rafters. Just silence. Then a pause where your voice should be. You open your mouth to speak. To yourself, to the rats, to whatever keeps you company in the quiet. And the words don't sound like you. Not different enough to frighten anyone else. Just off. A little too smooth. A little too heavy, as though someone had pressed their fingerprints into the shape of your breath. The first time it happens, you laugh it off. The sound isn't yours either. It comes out lower, deeper, like it belongs to a throat older than yours. You swallow hard, but your mouth tastes of iron, like you've bitten your tongue. You check the mirror, and your lips are wet with blood, but there's no wound. You try to speak again, just to prove you can. The words fall flat, and echo half a beat late. The second time it happens, you're in the library. You've been searching through brittle pages, desperate for answers, desperate for anything that looks like a warning or an escape. Your hands shake as you trace a line of text, and then they don't. They steady. They grow precise. Fingers that had been clumsy and raw from sleeplessness suddenly hold the quill like a craftsman's tool. And before you know it, you've begun to write. Your own hand. Your own script. But the words aren't yours. They spill from you without thought, looping symbols in broken Latin you've never learned. You can't stop until the ink runs dry and the candle gutters out. When you return to yourself, your fingers are cramped, your knuckles black with ink. The writing on the page is a prayer, or a curse. You can't tell the difference anymore. Possession isn't sudden. It isn't violent. It creeps. It waits until you're weak, until you're too tired to fight, until the thought of someone else taking control almost feels like relief. Then it slips in. Not like a thief, like a lover, quiet, gentle, familiar. You begin to realize it's been there longer than you thought. You find evidence in your own body, scratches on your arms you don't remember making, dirt under your fingernails though you never left your room, candle wax in your hair when no candles had been lit, the taste of wine on your tongue though your lips never touched a goblet. It uses you at night. It uses you when you blink. It uses you in those moments when your thoughts scatter and you forget what you were about to say. The fear isn't in the losing. The fear is in how natural it feels. The third time, you hear yourself speak in an empty room. You're sitting in the chair by the fire, head heavy in your hand, when your mouth moves without permission. I am here, you say. Not to yourself, not to the castle, to someone else, someone listening. The voice isn't yours. It carries weight, resonance, like stone cracking under pressure. You don't know what you've promised, only that the fire flares higher and the shadows lean closer to listen. You spend the next day trying to test yourself, holding out your hands, seeing if they tremble, speaking words aloud, checking if they arrive in your voice or another, writing sentences and watching for symbols you don't recognize. But the castle is clever. It lets you believe you're in control. The sentences are fine. The words are yours. The hands steady. And then, when you least expect it, when your heart dares to unclench, something changes. A twitch in your fingers, a word out of order, a silence between breaths that stretches too long. You know then that it doesn't need to take you all at once. It's patient. It will take you piece by piece. By the fourth time, you no longer trust your reflection. You cover every mirror, every reflective surface, terrified you'll see yourself moving when you're still. Once, you forget the mirror in the basin and catch sight of your eyes. They blink a second late. They linger too long on the knife at your waist. You cover the mirror with cloth and do not uncover it again. But you can't cover your dreams. In sleep, you watch yourself walk the halls, barefoot, silent, gliding more than stepping. Your hands drag along the stone as if they're memorizing the walls. You enter rooms you've never dared to open. The dungeons, the tower, the chapel. You kneel in each and speak words you don't understand, calling to something that answers back in heat and breath and rattling chains. You wake with the taste of ash in your mouth and your knees raw from stone. It isn't you anymore. You are watching yourself from outside. You hover just over your own shoulder, screaming into the void as your body walks forward without hesitation, as your lips shape syllables that curl like smoke, as your hands strike flint and light fires in places that should stay dark. You aren't chained, not in any way you can see, but you are trapped, forced to follow, forced to witness. The next morning, you find your journal full again, not with your hand, with theirs. Whole pages describing events you never lived, names you don't know, dates centuries past. And always, always, the same refrain, we are one. You don't scream when you read it. You don't cry. You don't even close the book. Because part of you already knows it's true. Possession isn't like the movies. It doesn't take everything from you in a moment of fire and fury. It leaves you with enough of yourself to recognize what you're losing, enough to watch as you slip further from your body, from your name, from your soul, enough to understand that the thing inside you doesn't just want to use you. It wants you to agree. The fire never burned right in this castle. No matter how much wood you fed it, the flames always seemed sluggish, as though reluctant to live, as though the hearth itself resented the act of warmth. The smoke smelled wrong too, thick and acrid, stinging your eyes until they watered, clinging to your clothes like a second skin. You blamed the chimney. You blamed the damp. You told yourself it was just the age of the stone, the way old places carried old scents, nothing more. You sat by it anyway because the nights were cold and long and darker than any dark you'd known before. You let yourself be comforted by the light, even if the heat never reached your bones. It was only after weeks of this that you noticed the ash, not the normal scatter of gray dust that comes from burned wood, but a heavier kind, black at first glance, but when you pinched it between your fingers, it left streaks too pale, almost white, too fine to be charcoal. You coughed as you sifted through it, the dust rising in the air and catching the candlelight in flecks like ground glass. You told yourself it was nothing, just wood burned down to powder. You told yourself not to look closer, but you did. A curve, small, smooth. You thought it was a pebble fallen from the chimney. You picked it up, turned it in your hand, and knew immediately it was not stone. It was a tooth. You dropped it, scattering the ash, and something else rolled free. longer, hollow, the shape unmistakable even before you touched it. A finger bone, blackened at the tip, cracked with fire. You recoiled, bile climbing your throat, but the hearth was greedy now. It offered more. A rib nestled deep in the soot, the jagged edge of a jaw. Fragments no bigger than coins. Fragments that once carried names and voices and lives. Your heart thundered as you clawed through the pile, unable to stop yourself, compelled as though the bones demanded to be found. The more you uncovered, the more the truth spread through you like rot. These weren't remnants from centuries ago, sealed by time. They were fresh enough to carry scent, sharp enough to cut your skin when you brushed their edges. The fire you'd been sitting beside wasn't fueled only by wood. It was fueled by people. The realization sickened you more than any ghost. You pulled back, trembling, and stared at the hearth as though it might spit another secret at you. The bricks seemed darker now, not with soot, but with stains baked deep, patterns of black that spread like veins. The air tasted of iron. You wondered how many nights you'd slept here, lulled by the crackle of flames, while the voices of the dead whispered through the smoke and into your lungs. You wondered how much of them lived inside you now. The next night you refused to light it. You sat in the dark, wrapped in every blanket you could find, listening to the walls creak and the wind moan through the tower windows. Your teeth chattered until your jaw ached. But when you glanced at the hearth, cold and unlit, you saw movement. A glow, faint and pulsing, as though embers still lived deep within. You crept closer, too curious for your own safety, and saw them, not flames, eyes, dozens of them, winking in and out beneath the ash. They watched you, unblinking, patient. You stumbled back, but the glow followed, stretching up the chimney, flickering along the stones. You swore you heard crackling that wasn't wood, a sound closer to screaming. Not loud, not sharp, but muffled, the way a voice sounds when buried. You pressed your hands to your ears, but it followed, leaking into your head like smoke. Words without language, pleas without mouths. The following morning the hearth was silent again, the bones buried once more beneath a crust of black ash. But you couldn't unsee them. Every time you walked past, you smelled burning flesh, acrid and sweet. Every time you sat too close, your skin prickled as though unseen hands reached for the warmth you still had. You stopped sleeping in that room. You told yourself it was safer somewhere else. But the castle doesn't let you escape. When you moved to the western chamber, you swore you left the hearth behind. Yet in the middle of the night, you woke to the scent of smoke. The bed curtains glowed faint orange, light flickering against the walls. You turned, heart racing, and found the hearth waiting there, built into the stone where no fireplace had been before, burning, cracking, whispering. The same bones shifting under the logs, the same ash rising into the air, the same glowing eyes. The bones follow you now. They shift when you aren't looking. They leave fragments where they shouldn't be, at the bottom of your boots, under your pillow, in the basin where you wash your hands. Last night you found a jawbone on the chair by your bed, teeth grinning in the candlelight. You don't know who they were. Soldiers? Servants? Guests like you, who tried to leave and couldn't? You only know that the castle made kindling of them, and that the fire will not go out until it has claimed enough. You don't light it anymore. You don't dare. But some nights, when the cold crawls so deep into your marrow that you can hardly feel your hands, you imagine striking a match. You imagine the warmth, the glow, the comfort. And you wonder if that's how it begins, if that's how they were trapped. Not dragged, not thrown, but tempted, because the fire is still there, waiting, and the bones shift when you breathe too close. The castle does not bare its teeth all at once. It doesn't slam doors or scream from the walls or send a figure lunging out of the dark with claws and fire. That would be too easy, too quick. Instead, it begins to guide, to show, to to coax you along corridors that shouldn't exist, toward choices you don't remember agreeing to. At first you think it's coincidence, the way doors unlock when you approach, or staircases rise where there were none the night before. You tell yourself it's just the nature of the place, a shifting labyrinth too old to trust its own foundation. But then, it starts leading you somewhere specific, and then you understand. It begins with the girl, or at least, the image of one. You see her in the library, between the rows of damp, swollen books. She's sitting cross-legged on the floor, a doll clutched in her hands, her hair tangled like weeds. She doesn't look up until you step closer. And when she does, you see her eyes are gone, sockets black and glistening, the skin around them raw. You stumble back, heart stuttering, but she doesn't move. She just whispers a single word, "Help." When you blink, she's gone, but the doll remains. Its porcelain face cracked, its chest caved in. You pick it up against your better judgment, and in that moment, every candle in the library goes out. You drop the doll and fumble for a light, and when the flame returns, the shelves are different, rearranged. A passage you've never seen before yawns open where the books once stood, a narrow hall swallowing the light whole. You know then the doll wasn't hers. It was yours, a key. You follow because you can't do anything else. The passage twists downward. Stones slick beneath your hands, air thick with mildew. You smell the hearth before you see it, the stink of burned flesh buried beneath wood smoke. And your stomach knots. The room you enter is small, circular. Its only furniture, a chair bolted to the floor, and a basin filled with something dark. In the chair sits a man, or what's left of one. His head lolls forward, his chest a hollow cage of ribs, his hands nailed to the armrests, but his mouth still moves. His lips split as they form words you hear inside your skull rather than through your ears. Choose. The room tilts. You're standing in two places at once. Here in the chamber with the nailed man, and somewhere else entirely, a kitchen you've never been in. The girl is there, the same eyeless child, her small frame trembling as she reaches toward a knife on the counter. You lurch forward to stop her, but your feet won't move. The nailed man's voice curls through your head again. If she cuts, you are free. If you cut, she is free. Your throat closes. You want to scream that you don't understand, that this isn't yours to decide. But the castle doesn't care. The knife is in your hand now, heavy, slick with sweat. The girl waits, frozen, her hollow eyes fixed on you. You feel the weight of the nailed man's gaze, though his sockets are empty, and you realize the choice is real. If you do nothing, both of you bleed. If you act, only one of you does. You drop the knife, or try to, but your hand won't obey. It rises, trembling, your wrist aching as if pulled by invisible strings. The castle wants you to choose. It doesn't want your blood, not yet. It wants the stain on your soul. It wants your decision. It wants to know which kind of death you can live with. You scream, not with words, but with every part of you that is still yours, every shred of will clinging to the body that doesn't seem to belong to you anymore. The knife clatters to the ground. The room goes black. When the light returns, you are alone. The nailed man is gone. The girl is gone. The basin is empty. Only the knife remains, gleaming as though polished. You take it with you, though you don't want to, though the weight of it sickens you. From that night forward, the castle shows you more. A mother sobbing over an empty cradle, rocking it with skeletal hands. A knight kneeling in chains, begging you to strike the blow he cannot give himself. A monk on fire, chanting your name as if you are both savior and executioner. Each vision demands a choice, you or them, mercy or survival. And each time you refuse, each time you drop the knife or shut your eyes or scream into the silence, the castle grows colder. The walls lean closer. The whispers grow louder. You begin to wonder if refusal is still a choice. You stop sleeping. You stop eating. You live only in the half-light of the torches that never burn out, waiting for the next vision, waiting for the next decision the castle presses into your hands. Sometimes you think you hear laughter in the stone, dry and ancient, as though the walls are amused by how long it takes you to break. Other times, you think you hear weeping. One night, you catch yourself whispering to the knife, not pleading, not begging, promising. You don't remember the words, only the taste of blood on your tongue after. The castle doesn't want to kill you. Not yet. It wants to see how far you'll go, how much of yourself you'll give before you stop being someone at all. It wants to know if you'll choose yourself, or if you'll choose them. And when it finally decides you're ready, it will stop showing you strangers. It will show you someone you love. You learn quickly that locks here don't care about metal. Keys don't matter. Not iron, not brass, not the heavy rusted things you carry on a ring at your belt. You can try them all night long, rattling one after another in the keyholes that appear where no doors used to be, and the castle will simply wait. It will let you sweat. It will let you pray. But it will not open. Not for tools. Not for pleading. Not for you. It wants something else. The first time, you only cut your finger. It was an accident. Clumsy, desperate, fumbling for a candle in the dark. You scraped your skin on a shard of broken glass, and when the blood welled, it slid across your knuckle and dripped, just once, onto the stone. The wall sighed. Not a groan of weight or an old beam settling, but a sigh, long and soft, almost like relief. Then the bricks shifted. One sank back, then another. And then the wall opened, revealing a stairwell spiraling down into black. You knew then, it's not a castle, it's a throat, and it eats blood. One drop is enough for the small things. A cut on your palm, a smear across the stone, and a door appears where there was none. You give it too much, and the room itself rearranges. The fire lights without tinder. The air sweetens with a cloying perfume, and shadows ripple across the walls like curtains lifting on a stage. You wonder how many before you learned this too late, how many carved themselves open piece by piece just to buy a little more time. But the castle is greedy. Soon, it isn't satisfied with drops. The second time, you wake with your arm aching. Your sleeve is soaked, sticky, the cloth stiff with blood. You don't remember cutting yourself. You don't remember moving at all. But when you look down, the knife lies beside you, slick, humming, with a warmth that isn't fire. The door in front of you is open, wide, waiting. Your own blood has already paid the toll. The castle doesn't just want your flesh. It wants the memory that comes with it. Every drop you lose feels tethered to something else. Some moment that slips out of your head like water down a drain. You try to recall the color of your childhood room, the sound of your father's voice, the smell of your mother's cooking, and you can't. The memories are gone, carried into the stones, bartered away for safe passage down another hall that isn't safe at all. You bleed to open the door, and the door takes pieces of you with it. The third time, you resist. You press your forehead against the cold wood. You whisper every prayer you know. You dig your nails into the keyhole until they split, but the door doesn't move. Not until the rats come, dragging something small and sharp across the floor. A nail, rusted, bent. They leave it at your feet like an offering, and in the silence that follows, you understand. You press the nail into your arm. The door groans open like a mouth splitting wide, and then you hear it. The voice, low and steady, threading itself into your pulse. Blood is the key. It isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. You hear it every time your heart beats. You hear it in your veins. You hear it in the silence between your own breaths. Soon it isn't just doors. The castle asks more, wants more. A passage opens only when you gouge the word yes into your thigh. A bridge spans across the courtyard, Only when you let the rats feed on the wound at your ankle. You light candles with your fingertips and watch the skin blister and split, and the fire doesn't go out until you smell your own flesh burning. You try to stop yourself. You try to hold on to what's left. But each offering is easier than the last. Each cut feels less like pain and more like ritual, less like survival and more like worship. You begin to wonder if the castle is teaching you, molding you into the kind of priest it wants, the kind of vessel it can use to finish whatever was started here centuries ago. One night you wake in the chapel, knife in hand, the altar dripping red. You don't know whose blood it is. You don't know if it's yours. You only know the door behind the altar is open, and you are the one who opened it. You begin to understand what sacrifice means here. It isn't a lamb. It isn't a body tossed into a pit and forgotten. It's yourself, sliced away in increments, a fingertip here, a memory there, an hour of your life, a piece of your soul. The castle doesn't kill you because you are killing yourself for it, and still, it wants more. Last night the door didn't open with blood. Not just blood, it demanded a choice. The wall pulsed beneath your hand, stone turning warm, and the knife rose without your help. Two doors appeared, side by side. One required your hand, the other required your voice. You cut, or you confessed. You gave flesh, or you gave truth. Either way, you fed it. You chose the hand. Now there's a scar that won't close, no matter how tight you bind it. A reminder that the castle doesn't deal in mercy. You think of escape often, but each time you approach the main gate, you feel the weight in your veins. The castle has tasted you. You are its key. Without your blood, the doors will never open. And if you leave, you know it will follow. Not with walls, not with chains, but with the pull of your own pulse, dragging you back, one beat at a time. Blood is the key, and you've already given it everything it asked for. It starts without ceremony. You wake in a room you don't recognize, though it looks enough like the others you've slept in, that you tell yourself it doesn't matter. Same stone walls slick with damp, same narrow slit of a window coughing in gray light, same bed that feels carved from wood meant for coffins. You light a candle, trace the cracks in the mortar with your eyes, and try to pretend it's just another night in a place that wants you dead. But then the clock chimes midnight. You don't remember ever hearing a clock in this castle before. Not once. Yet here it is, tolling 12, low and heavy, each sound a nail hammered into your spine. You freeze. The air thickens. The flame bends flat. And then you see it, yourself, across the room, your body, sitting in the chair by the fire, watching you. The candle goes out. Pain comes next. Not sharp, not quick. A slow crushing, like the weight of the walls pressing inward. Your breath sticks. Your chest doesn't rise. You claw at your throat, but your fingers don't find skin. They find something else. Something cold, slick, pulsing faintly. You fall to your knees, choking on a scream you can't force out, and the world folds black. When you wake, the sun is rising. The room is the same. Your clothes are the same. But your body isn't. Your hands are paler, as though the blood beneath your skin has retreated. Your nails are darker, faintly ridged, curling in ways they shouldn't. You whisper your name aloud just to hear it, and the sound stumbles, splitting halfway, like two voices tangled in your throat. You stagger to the basin, splash water on your face, and the reflection ripples before it steadies. For a moment, the face staring back isn't yours. You tell yourself it was a dream. You tell yourself you just blacked out. But when midnight comes again, the clock chimes once more. This time, you're ready. You grip the candle tight, waiting, daring yourself to fight whatever comes. The 12th chime echoes, and again, you see yourself. Not across the room this time, a closer, sitting on the bed, head cocked, smiling faintly, as if amused by your resistance. You lunge forward, ready to strike, but the pain doubles you over. The crushing weight returns, heavier, faster, and you collapse before you reach the bed. You wake with blood crusting your lips. Morning, same room, same clothes, new wounds. Your arm is bruised from shoulder to wrist. Deep purple-like fingers gripped it hard enough to reach bone. You can't remember how. You can't remember fighting. You can only remember the eyes of the thing that wore your face, glinting in the half-dark, as if it was already practicing how to live as you. Each night it repeats. Each midnight, another death. Each morning, another waking. And each time, something less of you comes back. On the fourth night, your voice doesn't sound like your own anymore. It rattles at the edges, vowels stretched, consonants too soft. You try to recite prayers, but the words twist, syllables bending, emerging in a language your tongue shouldn't know. The candles go out before midnight. When the 12th chime tolls, you don't even see the other self anymore. You see the whole room fill with figures, dozens of you, hundreds, lined up along the walls, each slightly different, each blinking in perfect unison. You don't remember collapsing, but the bruises on your knees say otherwise. On the 7th night, you realize the morning is lying to you. The sun rises, yes, but it doesn't warm. The light filters in gray, diluted, as though it has traveled too far to reach you. The rats don't come near anymore. Even they know what you are becoming. You lift your shirt and find your ribs sharper, pressing too close to the skin, your chest narrower, your spine longer. Your shadow on the wall bends at the wrong angles. You wonder how many times you've died now. You've lost count. By the 12th night, you don't try to resist. You sit in the chair by the fire, waiting for the toll. You don't light a candle. You don't breathe. When the chimes begin, you close your eyes and let it come. The pressure grips you like an embrace. It's almost comforting now, almost familiar. You fall forward, mouth opening to the floor, and this time you hear it. A voice inside the collapse. Not yours, not human. Almost. You wake with your fingernails gone, replaced with something harder, sharper. Your teeth ache in your skull. The mirror shows you smiling before you realize you are. The days blur together. Each morning you wake less human. Each night you die more willingly. The room no longer frightens you. The repetition is the only certainty you have left. You catch yourself wondering if the ritual will ever end. If the castle is whittling you down until nothing of you remains but what it wants. And then one morning, the clock doesn't chime at all. You wake to silence. No bruises, no blood, no marks. You rise slowly, suspicious, hands trembling as they touch the basin, the wall, the door. For a moment, you think it's over, that maybe you've been freed. But when you step toward the window, you see it reflected in the glass. Yourself, standing behind you, smiling. And this time, you don't wake up. It takes you too long to realize the map is alive. At first, you think it's just another scrap of parchment tucked between rotting tomes in the library, something overlooked for centuries, brittle but harmless. You touch it, careful, expecting the papery crumble of age, but it's warm, supple. And when you pull your hand back, the surface flexes, stretching faintly as though it resents your absence. You tell yourself it's leather, old, preserved, perhaps pigskin or calfskin, the kind scribes once used. That would explain the faint hair still visible along the edges, the pores rising like goose flesh beneath the faded ink. That would explain the way the lines are drawn not in ink but in something darker, something that clings too wetly to the page even after all this time. But denial lasts only so long. You know what it is. Human skin, and worse. It isn't finished. The lines of the castle sprawl across the hide, jagged and distorted, staircases leading into voids, corridors curling in on themselves like entrails. Some rooms are familiar. The chapel, the tower. The great hall where the feast lays itself at midnight. But whole sections are missing, the edges torn, ragged, patches stripped away like someone peeled them off. You stare at the gaps too long, and you begin to feel an itch along your arm. You try to put it back, to slide it between the books and leave it there, buried in mildew and shadow. But the map does not allow it. When you turn to walk away, it slides off the shelf by itself, fluttering to the ground with a wet slap. You pick it up against your will. You fold it, shove it beneath your shirt, but even pressed to your chest, it thrums faintly, like a heartbeat not your own. That night, you dream of needles, not sewing needles, not delicate pricks, but thick iron spikes driven through skin into wood, stretched taut like parchment until the body beneath ceases to be a body at all. The screams you hear are not of pain but of permanence, a chorus of voices begging not to be written into. When you wake, your forearm burns, and when you roll up your sleeve, you find a line there, thin and red, like a fresh cut, not deep enough to bleed, but enough to sting, a line that matches the path missing on the map. You don't remember making it. By the second night, more of the map has filled in. A spiral tower drawn in blood, jagged lines radiating from its base. You hold it up to the candlelight and see the faint outline of fingerprints pressed into the skin where the ink darkens. Your fingerprints. You know because they hurt. The tips of your fingers are raw, the skin peeling, tiny flakes falling like snow when you brush them. It doesn't take long to understand. The missing pieces aren't lost. They're waiting. The castle doesn't give parchment freely. It writes on what it owns, and it owns you. The itch spreads. Your back peels, flakes dusting your sheets. You scratch until your nails are clogged with curls of yourself, until the pain is sharp enough to drag tears from your eyes. In the morning, you find the map updated again, the missing corridor restored, its edges still wet, the blood seeping faintly into the pores. You try not to wonder which part of you it came from. Soon you can't hide the changes. Your skin carries the patterns. Ink rises through the surface, veins reshaping into lines, freckles forming constellations that don't belong to you. When you look in the mirror, your arms aren't arms anymore. They're pathways, staircases, doors. Your body is turning into a manuscript, your flesh nothing more than a canvas. You scream into the empty hall, but the sound curls back at you, bouncing from wall to wall until it sounds like laughter. You try to burn it. You take the map to the hearth, shove it into the flames. For a moment, it curls, blackening at the edges. The smell is unbearable, fat and hair and blood boiling all at once. You gag, turning away, and when you turn back, it's gone. Not ashes, not fragments, gone, until you feel the blister on your chest. You peel your shirt away and find the map branded there, carved into your skin in perfect detail, every corridor etched by fire, every door blistering open. It doesn't stop until it reaches your throat, and even then, the pain throbs as though promising to return. You can't escape it now. Even if you tear the skin from your body, even if you peel it off in strips, the castle will just write again. You begin to wonder how many maps there are, how many hides have been stripped, stretched, inked, folded. How many people wandered these halls before you, leaving trails of themselves pressed into skin that outlives bone. The next time you dream, you see the others, rows of them, hung like tapestries along the tower walls. Maps inked with names you can't pronounce, faces faintly pressed into the flesh, mouths still open in silent screams. They twitch when you pass, their lines shifting, stairways reshaping, as if the castle is still using them, still editing, still rewriting. You wake with your chest weeping, blood and ink mixed together, dripping down your ribs. When you look at the map, your map, you see a new room. The only room that has ever been drawn clearly, a chamber deep beneath the castle, marked with a single word, exit. but the skin ends before the path reaches it. Torn away, waiting to be replaced, waiting for more. You know now, if you want to leave, you'll have to give the castle the rest of you, piece by piece, flake by flake, until there's nothing left but the map. You thought fire would be the end. Fire is final. It devours, it purifies, it erases. You dragged every scrap of the castle you could carry into the courtyard. Parchments that whispered, curtains that moved when there was no wind, even the map that had begun to etch itself into your chest. You stacked them high, poured lamp oil until it stung your eyes, and struck the flint with trembling hands. The flames rose fast, too fast, hissing as though eager, black smoke curling like fingers into the night. You stepped back, breathing hard, waiting for the castle to scream. But the castle didn't scream. You did. The fire didn't stop at wood and cloth. It spread in ways it shouldn't, leaping across stone, across air, searing into the marrow of your bones. The smell was wrong, not smoke, but something sweeter, heavier, burning fat, burning skin. You clawed at your arms, desperate to put it out, and felt blisters rise where no flame touched. When you collapsed in the dirt, you realized the fire hadn't consumed the castle at all. It had consumed you. You woke hours later. Ender days. Time is a broken thing here, with the ashes cooled around you. The tower still stood. The walls still loomed. Every stone was untouched, as if you'd never lit a spark. Only your body bore the marks. Blackened streaks across your hands, skin raw and splitting, lips cracked until they bled. You looked down at yourself and understood. The castle had let you think you could hurt it. It had let you offer yourself up like kindling, and then it had eaten the fire whole, swallowing the sacrifice into its gut. You staggered back inside, dizzy with the stench of your own charred flesh, and tried the other rituals. Salt along the doorways, circles scratched into the floor, prayers mumbled until your tongue slurred. Nothing held. The salt clumped wet in your hands as though it had already absorbed blood. The circles bent until they no longer closed. The prayers twisted into laughter halfway out of your throat. Every attempt ended the same way, with your reflection smirking in the basin, with your own voice mocking you from the corners of the room. The castle was inside you now. You feel it in your breath first. The air tastes of stone, grit grinding against your teeth, a damp chill clinging to your tongue. Then, in your pulse. Slow, heavy. Not your heartbeat, but something older. A rhythm of bricks settling, mortar cracking. When you move, you swear you hear it too. The faint groan of walls shifting, of staircases creaking, as though your veins are no longer veins but corridors, hallways that stretch deeper every time you close your eyes. And when you sleep, if you sleep, you dream not of escape, but of rooms, endless rooms, each lit by a single candle, each filled with shadows that stretch toward you, whispering your name. You wake with dust in your throat, cobwebs on your face, stone grit beneath your fingernails. The rooms are no longer dreams. They are parts of you. The laughter begins softly. You mistake it at first for the wind sighing through cracks in the towers. But wind doesn't carry tone. Wind doesn't form words. The sound grows clearer each night, rattling in your chest like a second voice. It waits until you are weakest, until you've spent hours clawing at the skin that no longer feels like your own, until you've sobbed into the ash-stained sheets. Then it comes, low and steady, mocking without cruelty. The way a predator mocks prey too foolish to understand. It's already caught. It laughs when you light a fire. It laughs when you whisper prayers. It laughs when you try to cut the map from your flesh with the edge of a blade, only for the wounds to close over with fresh ink before the blood dries. You slash again and again, carving yourself raw, and the lines only deepen, correcting your strokes, rewriting your body into cleaner architecture. By the end, you're on your knees, covered in blood, listening to the sound of the walls inside you, chuckling like old men around a table. And still, the castle stands untouched. It isn't stone anymore. Not really. It's not a place. It's a parasite. It crawls beneath your skin. It worms through your thoughts. It builds staircases through your marrow and hangs tapestries across your ribs. The torches on the wall flare when your pulse quickens. The doors groan when your lungs drag in air. You are not in the castle. The castle is in you. You realize this when you try to leave again. You make it to the courtyard, the gate towering above, stars faintly burning in the sky beyond. For a heartbeat, hope stabs you awake. You think maybe, just maybe, you've beaten it. You lunge for the gate. You press your hands to the iron. And the metal is warm, too warm. You pull back and find your palms blistered, smoking. The gate laughs with your voice. The stars blink out. The sky caves in. You fall to your knees as the courtyard walls lean close, bending like ribs around a heart. Your heart. There is no outside anymore. You stumble back into the halls, and the laughter follows, echoing from your chest, from the ceilings, from the cracks between bricks. You shout for it to stop, voice raw, spittle flying, but your shout is the same as the laughter. The castle doesn't answer because it doesn't need to. It is answering every time you speak. You're not burning the castle. You're burning yourself, and the fire hasn't gone out. The air outside doesn't feel like freedom. It feels thin, wrong, like you've stepped into a painting of the world instead of the world itself. The sky is blue, but too flat. The trees sway, but their leaves make no sound. You press your hand to the earth, trembling, and the soil is cold as stone, pulsing faintly as though it has veins beneath it. You tell yourself you've escaped, that the gate truly opened this time, that the path didn't fold back on itself. You repeat it again and again, like a prayer. I made it out. I made it out. I made it out. But your voice doesn't sound like yours anymore. You walk. You don't know how long. The road stretches forward, lined by grass that leans in your direction as though following. Villagers pass at a distance, their faces blurred, their bodies too stiff, eyes a little too wide when they glance at you. None of them speak. None of them wave. You think maybe they see it already, the thing walking inside your skin. You wrap your arms around yourself, shrinking, but your shadow spills longer than it should, stretching ahead like a tongue. When you reach water, you collapse to your knees, desperate to see yourself reflected. You lean over the surface, shaking, praying for familiarity, for proof that you are still who you were when this began. The river ripples, slow and oily, and the face that looks back is not yours, not entirely. The eyes are too dark, irises swallowing the whites. The mouth is too wide, the teeth faintly crooked where they hadn't been before. The skin bears faint lines that pulse like ink, pathways curling down the jaw, across the neck, vanishing beneath the collar. You slam your fist into the water until the reflection shatters. But when the ripples fade, it returns, patient, smiling. That night, you sleep in a barn on the edge of a village, straw prickling your skin, the smell of animals cloying. You dream of doors, not the gates of the castle, not the locked chambers you bled to open. New doors, rows of them, endless, each marked with symbols you almost recognize, each breathing faintly as though waiting. You know better than to touch them, but your hand rises anyway. When your palm presses against the first, warmth surges up your arm, and you hear the laughter again. You wake with straw soaked in sweat, but your hand is burning. A sigil glows faintly across your palm, etched into the flesh as if branded in your sleep. You clutch it to your chest and rock until the fire dies, but the mark doesn't fade. It throbs like a second heartbeat, and when you close your eyes, you see the door again, waiting. You survived. That much is true. You're no longer inside those walls. The stone no longer dictates your every breath. But the castle is not gone. It is inside you, stitched into your blood, curling through your marrow like roots. Every step you take into the world beyond carries it further. Every breath you draw feeds it. And worse, you are beginning to want it. You feel it in the way your tongue curls around words you've never spoken, syllables that taste of smoke and salt. You feel it in the way strangers flinch when you pass, their bodies recoiling though you haven't touched them. You feel it when you catch yourself smiling at nothing, lips splitting wide as the whispers hum inside your chest. The castle isn't behind you anymore. It's carried forward in your body, brick by brick, hall by hall. Some nights you dream of returning. The thought should terrify you. It doesn't. You imagine walking back through those gates, not as a victim, not as prey, but as part of it. You imagine the torches bending to your will, the doors opening without blood, the ghosts bowing as you pass. The castle would not fight you then. It would welcome you home. But when morning comes, the thought lingers, not as fantasy, as inevitability. The villagers whisper when you pass now. They cross themselves, clutch charms, mutter prayers. You try to ask them what they see, but your voice doesn't match the words. It slips halfway through, deepening, stretching, syllables breaking in places they shouldn't. They flee before you can finish. You stop trying, you stop speaking. But at night, your voice fills the dark anyway, chanting from your lips though you are fast asleep. And the doors keep appearing. In dreams, yes, but also in waking life. A barn wall shudders, and a handle forms where there was none. The trunk of a tree bulges, splitting open just enough to reveal a shadowed frame. Even in the village, behind a baker's shop, you swear you see a door carved into stone, pulsing faintly, waiting for you to open it. You don't. You walk away, shaking, nails biting your palms. But your shadow lingers, reaching for the handle. You know now that survival wasn't the reward. Survival was the cost. The castle let you go, because you are no longer simply yourself. You are its envoy, its vessel, the body it wears when it needs to breathe beyond its walls. You wonder if others before you walked this same road, carrying the same marks, spreading the same whispers, opening the same hidden doors in villages that no longer exist. Maybe that is why the castle has lived for centuries, because it doesn't stay in one place. It spreads, seed by seed, through people like you. You tell yourself you'll resist, that you'll lock your hands, bite your tongue, fight every urge until you've starved it out. But when you sleep, the laughter grows louder, and when you wake, the marks spread further. The map crawls across your skin, filling gaps, sketching new paths that lead away from the castle but toward something larger, something endless. You survived, but the castle survived in you, and every time you close your eyes, another door opens.